Dominic Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Today, we are live at Twin Peaks out here in Madison, where tonight at 6 o'clock, we will have the draft show, draft night in Nashville. Trevor Maddich, Derek Mason, Chris Sanders will all be live out here at Twin Peaks in Madison. And I'll say this, right now there's probably, 20, 25 people. There's probably room. I don't want to get anybody mad at me. I don't want the fire marshal or anything. There's probably room for like 150 people in here. So pack them in tonight because we will be here from 6 until the end of round 1. And yes, and I heard the midday show today, Ian. They were setting the Vegas odds on a meltdown tonight when the Titans pick at 7 o'clock or at 7 after the draft starts at 7 o'clock. Caroline said minus 650. Which I thought was a little.
That seems a little high, but.
I thought it was a little out there. I mean, and that being said, again, 6 o'clock the draft show starts, 7 o'clock the draft starts. Chris Sanders, Derek Mason, Trevor Maddich, all right here at Twin Peaks in Madison. So stop on by. And our coverage tonight will be presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, ESPN Bet Sportsbook, and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. All right, let's start with this. I cannot make any promises that I can't keep. I will not do that. I am not going to sit here and tell you that I'm not going to freak out tonight when the Titans pick at 7. I can't promise that. But I think it is highly unlikely that I'm going to go crazy today when the Titans pick at 7. Because while the Titans can absolutely, quote-unquote, screw up this draft, by picking a guy who maybe off the field we don't know's got problems or maybe isn't a fit for a system or something like that. Given where they're picking in this draft, I find it very, very difficult for that to happen. The draft really today starts at 3 because Caleb Williams is going to go at 1, and it is almost a lead pipe lock that Jaden Daniels will go at 2. Just the expectation is that it's going to be quarterback 1, quarterback 2. Well, you don't need a quarterback. So the more quarterbacks that go, the better. Drake May goes at 3, great. I hope JJ goes at 4 or 5 or whatever, because then that pushes the good players down to you. And we've talked about the elite players in this draft. Every time that we used to have a draft day, we'd start it right here, 2 o'clock back in the day on the old Jared and the GM program, and the old man would have 5 Titans targets. And this was when they were picking at 19 or picking at 21 or picking at 28. And it's like, okay, going into the night, here are the 5 targets you hope are available. If they're not there, you trade out. You know, there's some pie in the skies that if this guy happens to be available, take it, but he's probably not going to be. But here are 5 guys. Here's the hope, is that one of these 5 guys is there that you can take. Well, you're picking at 7, and 3 or 4 quarterbacks are going off the board before you pick. So to me, this is a simple draft. This should be an easy draft. This should be the night, because no matter what happens, as long as 3 quarterbacks go with the first 3 picks, you are guaranteed to be able to draft one of the following high-level, big-time prospects: Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Brock Bowers, or Roma Dunze. And if the Titans walk away with any of those players tonight, I'll be happy about the future of this team. They need playmakers, I know. They signed Tony Pollard. They signed Calvin Ridley. You know, people think, oh, yeah, no, that's our number 1. That's our wide receiver number 1. Where does Calvin Ridley rank in the league? 13th? 14th? That's not bad. And I'm not crapping on Calvin Ridley, but what I'm saying is, you take one of these guys really, really high, you take Neighbors or Marvin Harrison, we're talking about Jamar Chase level good. You know, that's the hope. We know left tackle's been a problem for this team for the last 2 years. Draft Joe Alt with that pick, and I'm pretty sure you don't have to worry about the left tackle position. And then Brock Bowers is an absolute playmaker. Rick Spielman compared Roma Dunze to A.J. Brown as a comp. I think we all could say, you know what, the Titans could use A.J. Brown. So it is almost certain. Again, you're at pick 7. Quarterback. Draft starts at 4. Let's say Marvin Harrison. I'd love to have Marvin Harrison. Let's say he goes at 4. Let's say Joe Alt goes at 5. I'd love to have Joe Alt at 5. Let's say Malik Neighbors goes at 6. I'd love to have Malik Neighbors while I'm still getting Brock Bowers or I'm still getting Rome Odunze. And there's absolutely nothing, unless I decide to trade back, there's absolutely nothing that can change that. And all of these guys are high-level elite prospects. This is not the 2022 draft where all of the gurus and everything else were looking at it and they were saying, yeah, there's like 10 first-round draft choices. There's like 13 first-round grades in this year's draft. This is an elite draft. These guys like Marvin Harrison and Joe Alt, they're not available at 7 in other drafts, but because all these teams need quarterbacks, and there are quarterbacks this year, and there's not going to be quarterbacks next year, this right here for these teams is like, well, we got to take a quarterback. Washington's got all these picks, and they got to take a quarterback. They can't take Marvin Harrison Jr. So to me, I break down, to me, I think there are 3 separate groups here that are possibilities for the Titans. Number 1 for me is these are the guys that you draft them at 7. I don't care what you're offered. If it doesn't, as long as it's not like 8 number 1 picks, if you walk away tonight with one of these guys, I'm happy. And I'm going in the order with which I would pick them. Number 1 is Joe Alt. He would be the number 1 hope for me today. That is over Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and all the other guys because I think he's the cleanest prospect of the group. Elite tape, NFL bloodlines, elite testing, which Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't have, 34 consecutive starts at Notre Dame, clean medicals, and a premium position. And while this draft is deep at tackle, so you could go back at 38, it is also deep, and I would argue deeper, at wide receiver. Add in the fact that you signed Calvin Ridley. To me, Joe Alt is the number 1 guy that I'm looking at today. Number 2 is Malik Neighbors. He gets the nod to me over Marvin Harrison because I thought, watching college football this year, I thought Malik Neighbors was a better player. Every time I watched LSU play, I said, Malik Neighbors is that dude. Like, he's the man. I watch Ohio State play, and Marvin's good, but I never, I always talk about feeling a player. I didn't feel Marvin Harrison Jr. the way I felt Malik Neighbors when I would watch those games. Plus, Malik Neighbors did the testing, Marvin Harrison didn't, and Malik Neighbors' testing was elite. So Malik Neighbors is number 2. Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 3. He won't fall to 7, but if he does, take him. And I don't think there's any discussion after that. If we leave Twin Peaks tonight with Marvin Harrison Jr. as a Tennessee Titan, you will not hear me complain. Number 4 is Brock Bowers. I have Bowers ahead of Odunze here, but it was close. To me, I don't care that Bowers is a tight end. I know a lot of people are like, Jared, tight ends aren't very good in the first round, and this tight end and that. Yeah, Brock Bowers isn't really a tight end. Brock Bowers is a weapon. He is a matchup nightmare. He's the 3rd guy in a trips receiver set, Hopkins and Ridley and Bowers. He can play the slot. You can stick him in the backfield. I mean, he is a special player. Mark Dominic will be on the show at 4 o'clock today. We'll ask him. He says take Bowers, right off the top. Bill Polian loves Bowers. I mean, everybody seems to love Bowers here. So Bowers is in play at 4, Odunze at 5. That's the guy that I'm like, okay, if for some reason Alt's gone, Neighbors is gone, Harrison's gone, Odunze is gone, Bowers is gone, take Odunze. And if you want to take Odunze over Bowers, I'm not going to argue about it, though I would take Bowers over Odunze. Then there's group number 2. I'm not going to go nuts if they take them at 7. Like if their board shakes out this way and they decide to take them at 7, I'm not going to go crazy. But I would prefer the other guys, and I know one of the other guys is going to be there. Olu Fashanu and Dallas Turner. Now, I've talked to some people that either are in the league or have been in the league, and they tell me that Fashanu, I hear mixed reviews on Fashanu. One thing I've heard is that he's got elite potential from somebody who I trust. Doesn't have the technique yet, isn't as far advanced as Alt, but he's got elite potential. Well, that's what you pay Bill Callahan for, is to be able to draw out the best out of that elite potential. And then with Dallas Turner, I think Dallas Turner is a better pass rusher than, say, J.C. Latham is a right tackle. But Turner still needs some work. His biggest calling card is his athleticism. Tyree Wilson was an unbelievably athletic pass rusher last year, didn't do much. Well, so was Javon Curse, and we know how that story went out. And then I've got what I call Group 3, which is the trade down group. And again, this is Minnesota calls, Denver calls, the Raiders call, and you end up moving out. Then if you're picking at 11 or 12 or 13, I know you're not going to get Joe Alt. You're probably not going to get Brock Bowers. You're definitely not going to get any of the receivers. At that point, I would be okay with J.C. Latham. I'd be okay with Thalise Fuaga. And I'd be okay, and we haven't talked about him at all, but I'd be okay with Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, because he might be the best defensive player in this draft. And you can always use extra help at DB. So far in our mock drafts, we've ended up, when we've done the simulations, the Pro Football Focus thing, Marvin Harrison, Brock Bowers, Joe Alt, Jaden Daniels, Joe Alt, and J.C. Latham. We've got 2 more we're going to do today. But again, we don't go outside of this list of players. And the Titans should not be going outside of the list of these players either. And see, what tonight is tonight is the Christmas day for the horrendous season that we had to endure last year. With all the drama and the bull crap and Vrabel and all the, Andre Dillard and is Skoronski a guard? Is he a tackle? And what about Tannehill and Henry and the trade deadline and Byard? And that just miserable season last year. This is the reward, is that you are in a spot where you are going to walk out of tonight with an elite player. And if you don't walk out of tonight with an elite player, then you really screwed the pooch. And I don't even think this group, which I don't have a ton of faith in, I don't even think they would screw up tonight. So I'm excited. This is probably the most excited I've been for a draft show probably since the draft was here. Maybe the COVID draft, just because there was nothing else to do until the COVID draft. I think I got kind of sad, though, because I was like, well, what are we going to talk about once the draft's over? But tonight, this is the gift for sucking so bad. And this is how Detroit got good, by drafting Penei Sewell. This is how Cincinnati got good, by drafting Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. This is how these teams, for the most part that stink, this is how they get good. Everybody except for Kansas City. You know what pick Josh Allen was for the Buffalo Bills? 7th. So let's roll. 615-737-1025. We will get to you early and often today at 615-737-1025. Again, the draft show tonight, 6 o'clock, right here at Twin Peaks in Madison. We are inviting everybody out here. We're going to be giving away tons of stuff, I think, out here at the draft show tonight. Come on out, hang out. Again, we're Twin Peaks in Madison, and we'll be taking your calls today. Chris Sanders is going to join us later this hour. He will be here tonight with Derek Mason and Trevor Maddich, and we will be drafting starting at 7 with the show at 6. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
I will say this about the Chargers, though. He has brought up offensive line. It has affected other teams to the point where in like the last 5 days, J.C. Latham, the Alabama right tackle, became a very prominent. There's a very prominent belief that like the Chargers are very locked onto Latham. Some people believe the Titans really like Latham. Like if let's say Alt came off at 5, some people think the Titans would be more than happy to run the card in on Latham at 7. I trotted it out yesterday. I think it was early afternoon. I said I put Latham at 5. I got killed by Chargers fans. They absolutely murdered me. And then Daniel Jeremiah comes out with his mock late last night. And oh, surprise, Latham now is at 5. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not the only one hearing this. Clearly,
he's copying you.
I'm sure DJ's copying me. But yeah, I sit there and I look at it and I'm like, if they do this, and that's when I spotted them there. I'm like, if they do this, like, where are they getting their wide? They need wide receiver talent, and you'd be passing an elite at 5 to do this. Maybe even Marvin Harrison Jr., depending on how it all comes in.
All right, maybe I'll look stupid, but I am not buying the buzz whatsoever. I mean, not one iota, not 1 second, not one scintilla. Am I buying the idea that the Chargers are taking J.C. Latham with the 5th overall pick? But that is the scuttlebutt. That was Charles Robinson this morning on Robbie and Joe. And he's sitting there saying, hey, I'm starting to hear that the Chargers are going to go J.C. Latham at 5. Daniel Jeremiah mocks J.C. Latham to the Chargers at 5. And everybody, I think Field Yates this morning, by the way, mocked J.C. Latham at 5. I heard Caroline bring this up today. And I think there's some truth to this, which is that Joe Ortiz, who is the general manager of the Chargers, though he is kind of the second in command. He is the John Lynch there. We all know Jim Harbaugh's in charge. Joe Ortiz and Daniel Jeremiah go way back. Like when Daniel Jeremiah was a scout, Joe Ortiz was a scout. I think they worked together with the Ravens, though I'm not sure. But, they go back. And so it seems, the scuttlebutt that I heard Caroline talking about was that it was, around the league, from what she heard, was that it's Joe Ortiz who's telling Daniel Jeremiah, we're going to take J.C. Latham, and everybody then kind of reacting to that. I do not buy. There would only be 2 reasons, in my opinion, that he would be telling everybody they're going to take J.C. Latham. The first is that they're actually going to take J.C. Latham, and they're doing it now to dip their toe into the water so that when that pick comes across at 5, their fan base doesn't revolt when they pass on Malik Neighbors, for instance, in order to draft J.C. Latham. And teams do need to do that. If it's not a surprise, I think sometimes you can live with it. The second reason, and I think more likely reason, is I think they decided to float a player out there that absolutely is not worthy of the 5th overall pick. Because when you float out there that we're interested in taking a guy who's not worth the 5th overall pick, teams that are sitting there at 9, for instance, Chicago is going to pick up the phone and say, wait a minute, hold on. Before you do that, you can take J.C. Latham at 9. What will it take to get for you to flip with us if our guy, Neighbors, Adunze, Harrison, if that guy's there, what will it take for us to be able to flip up there with you? And so they float out a name that is absolutely not worth the 5th overall pick. And when I hear Charles Robinson say that a lot of people are saying, hey, the Titans would be totally fine running that card in for Latham, I'm like, oh, God, no. Oh, God, that's how they screw it up. If they're going to screw it up, that's how they're going to do it. They're going to take him at 7. I don't mind him at 11. Well, I don't like him at 11, but I don't mind him at 13, but I'm not taking him at 7. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, let's just call it how it is. So all this scuttlebutt and smoke when it comes to the Chargers, I'm not buying. The second thing is, and I heard Caroline talking about this today, and I also think that this is probably right, is that Joe Alt came on the show yesterday and said he's more comfortable at left tackle than he is at right tackle, but if a team drafts him at right tackle, then he'll have to go back to the basics and learn how to play right tackle, and basically didn't say, I'm not interested in playing right tackle because he doesn't want to be that kind of guy. But I think that the teams that are looking at Joe Alt as a potential right tackle, which would be the Giants and would be the Chargers, because both teams have highly, highly paid left tackles, I think they've been told, hey, man, Joe Alt's probably not wanting to move to right tackle. And so maybe the Chargers did like Joe Alt, and now they're like, well, we want to get a right tackle, and Joe doesn't want to play right tackle, so what are we going to do? But I think there's some truth to that. I am not buying the buzz that the Chargers are drafting J.C. Latham. If the Chargers draft J.C. Latham at 5 today, A, I will be shocked. B, I will be ecstatic. Because that not only means that that's going to push Joe Alt more likely than not, to the Titans, but it also means, and I think this is more important, that you're not going to take J.C. Latham, which I don't want you to do. Because when I hear Trevor Maddich say that J.C. Latham may have to kick back into guard, that's all I need to know. And before you guys tell me, well, Trevor, Greg Cosell, Trevor's the one who told you from the beginning Dylan Radins couldn't play. He's the one that told you Aaron Brewer was too small. He's the one that when the Titans try to sell you a narrative about something on the offensive line, Trevor's the one that's like, no, you can't really do that. And he's been right every time. So when he says that he thinks Latham may have to kick back into guard, and he says Latham he doesn't think can flip to left tackle, I'm not interested in Latham. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. I also saw, by the way, another rumor, and I promise phones in a second. I saw another rumor where they had, it was Diana Rossini came out about an hour ago and said the Rams are trying to get into the top 10. Well, the Rams are at 19. There is nothing the Rams have that they would reasonably trade that I would be interested in flipping from 7 to 19. I'm not interested in going from 7 to 19 if you give me next year's first. 19, you're 2 next year, or you're 2 this year, and you're 1 next year, and I'm still probably going to take the player. So there's just, to me, like, you can move to 13. I ain't moving to 19. Adam in Portland is up next. Our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, kick us off. Go ahead.
I mean, maybe Cooper Kupp or something. I mean, you could package him, but yeah, you're right.
You want to take an injured receiver who's probably approaching 30 years old?
Yeah, with a lot of other stuff, but he would have to be part of it. Hey, all right, so I've listened to your last few draft shows, Jared. I do think the Monty Rice overreaction was well worth it. I thought he was a sucky pick, but last year it was all this talk about Skoronski, and I'm going to get to my prediction, but it was all this talk about Skoronski being was he or was he not the top offensive lineman in the draft? I still think he was. And I can't stand the way you say guard, by the way. I know they make fun of you for it, but that's let the big dog eat 2.0. I really wish you'd drop it. It really hurts me.
Because I was right about that and I'm right about this.
It hurts my ears. So I really hope what
only
they're
a
doing
moron
this year,
takes a guard that's not that good with the 11th pick, and that's exactly what you did, and that's the point of it.
Okay, I didn't do it, but I watched him do it. I don't think it was a bad pick.
I know, but that's the reason why we do it, is to emphasize how much that screwed the Titans by screwing up the draft last year. That's the point.
Isaiah Wilson screwed him up, dude. That's what we're still trying to catch up on.
I'll tell you this right now.
Anyway, that's
you
not
guys
the point.
do not understand. Adam, thank you for your call. You guys do not understand something, which is that, like, I keep hearing about, this pick was bad, this pick was bad, this was the 28th pick in the draft. You miss on that, like, you can survive. You miss on 7, you're screwed. Like, the stakes are so much higher today. They are so much higher today. It's like I still argue, and I'm glad he brought up Isaiah Wilson because I believe this, and you guys will say that I argued. Jared Stillman says that you don't believe. I think the pick of Corey Davis was a bigger mistake than the pick of Isaiah Wilson because Corey Davis was a top 5 pick. You can't blow these picks. Just like you can't take guards at 11. Which they did last year. You can't do it. And so, that's why I'm so happy about this year's draft, because with these guys, with Harrison and Neighbors and Adunze and Bowers and Alt, you can't, one of those guys, they all have elite NFL traits. None of them There's a little scuttlebutt about neighbors off the field, but I think that may just be teams just putting that out there to push him down a little bit. None of these guys seem to have big baggage off the field. Like, this is why you can't screw tonight up. Like, you can't screw tonight up. And I'm sure some people are going to be mad because I cut Adam in Portland off because he wanted to make his prediction. He already did that on Robbie and Joe this morning, so we don't need it. It's not the Adam in Portland show. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. More your phones. 615-737-1025. And there is another player who we kind of discounted for a little bit, brought back into the discussion, but I heard something else that makes me think he absolutely should be in the discussion at 7. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company live out at Twin Peaks in Madison, where once again tonight at 6 o'clock, we will have the draft show at Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. tight end doesn't look as normally a premium position, but you don't seem to play like a normal tight end, do you?
I feel like Georgia used me a little differently here and there. They put me in the backfield, flexed me out wide. Just kind of used me wherever, and I thought that was a ton of fun. So I think I might be a little different maybe.
There you go. That was Brock Bowers at the Super Bowl saying, Georgia, they use me a little differently than the tight end. And a lot of you guys have thrown up the stop sign at third base on Brock Bowers and said, no. Do not take Brock Bowers with the 7th pick. Now, look, my number one guy is Joe Alt. And if I end up with Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors on the board with Bowers, I'm taking those guys. But I've got no problem with Brock Bowers with the 7th pick. And Mark Dominic was the one that kind of brought that back to my attention. That kind of was like, hey, thank you so much. Mark Dominic was the one who kind of brought that back to my attention when he was like, oh, no, I'd take him, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. Wouldn't even think twice. I'm like, okay. Bill Polian last night on SiriusXM NFL Radio was asked about Brock Bowers. And again, you guys out there are like, oh, you can't take a tight end in the top 10 because they're not that good. Here's what Bill Polian had to say. And after you hear this, you tell me, and again, this is a Gold Jacket Hall of Famer. After you hear this, you tell me if you're like, okay, I wouldn't want to take Brock Bowers.
This isn't 1995 anymore. And the game is very different. And it's now a passing league. That's a cliche, but that translates to wide open formations and tight ends who are not attached very much anymore. And you can find tight ends who can block. In fact, you can make them fullbacks. They can play 2 positions. The Kansas State kid is that guy. But what you can't find are tight ends who can detach and run routes like receivers and catch the ball like receivers and run after the catch and do all those things. And Brock Bowers can. He can play attached. He can play singled up on the backside of trips. He can play in the slot. He can do all of those things because he's a natural route runner, a natural separator, a natural catcher of the ball, and has more than enough speed to be able to mismatch certainly linebackers and safeties. My concern with Brock Bowers is if you wanted to play him as a traditional tight end, the way Baltimore plays Andrews, for example, that would worry me simply because of his body type. To borrow a phrase from Ron Jaworski, the tight end is a rookie quarterback's best friend. He can do everything you want a quality receiver to do, and he can do it from a number of different platforms and alignments. In the top 10, you've heard me say this 100 times, but I'll repeat it. In the top 10, you should draft someone who scores touchdowns, who sacks the quarterback, who intercepts the ball. And in this case, Brock Bowers scores touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You hear that, and it's like, well, if you're thinking of a traditional tight end, he's not that. Well, the guys that you guys are like, oh, no, tight ends in the first round, those are traditional tight ends. Bowers isn't that. And when you guys say to me, well, Cincinnati doesn't use the tight end that much, so why would the Titans with Brian Callahan, why would you want Brock Bowers? Because I don't think that Brock Bowers, again, is a tight end. I think Brock Bowers is going to be the Tyler Boyd of this offense if he's that kind of player. He'll be in the slot. He'll be lined up all over the place, and I think he will be a guy that they just throw the ball to constantly, just constantly pound the ball to this receiver, and it's going to be Bowers. And when we think of these kind of coaches, these Ram McVay-type coaches, that's actually exactly what they do, right? That's what Cooper Kupp is in that offense. T.J. Hawkinson, for instance, in Minnesota, was a top 10 pick with the Lions, and he was okay. And then he gets traded to Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. He caught 95 passes last year in 15 games before he got hurt. Well, I have a lot of respect for it. And I hear a guy like Polian, who's got a gold jacket as a GM, and they're like, absolutely you can take Brock Bowers in the top 10 as long as you don't try to use him like it's 1995 football. I think, you know what? He should be in play in the discussion for the Titans. And if they end up with him tonight, I'm not going to be upset about it. Let's go to Billy, who's up next here on the program as we're live out at Twin Peaks in Madison, where the draft show will be tonight at 6 o'clock. Billy, go ahead.
How you doing, Jared? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm kind of warming up to the whole Brock Bowers thing because most great quarterbacks have that safety valve, that tight end. But I'm calling to kind of settle a debate. Last year, a lot of people were calling for the tank, and you said no, you play to win the games no matter what. Would you rather, A, win the Miami game and pick 7th, lose that Miami game, you're picking 5th, and then you get to choose any player you want. You don't have to worry about anybody getting passed over. What would you prefer?
I'd rather win the Miami game.
Well, thanks for the time, man. I appreciate it.
Yep, I'd rather win the Miami game, and I'll tell you why. Peyton Manning said it on the Manning cast that night. As Levis was driving them back, he said, "This reminds me of me," talking about Manning, when he was quarterbacking as a rookie, Indianapolis. They were 3-13, and he said he had a come-from-behind victory against the Jets. And getting that come-from-behind victory against the Jets was the moment that he knew that he had the confidence that he could do it. And I think that's really important. And, I mean, again, every time we've run one of these draft simulations and Jaden Daniels is there, or Drake May's there, and I'm like, so do you take Jaden Daniels? Do you take Drake May? You guys get all up in a pissy about it because it's like, we have a franchise quarterback. And you guys only think that because of the Miami game. You know, I mean, that was a big moment for him. I mean, if he finishes with 2 wins as a quarterback, has the great debut, but then barely ever wins again the rest of the year, it's really hard, you know, to defend that. And confidence for a fan base and a quarterback, for a coaching staff and a quarterback, for a locker room and a quarterback, I think is very important. So I'll sacrifice the 2 wins for the 2 spots in the draft for the come-from-behind win against Miami. And I'm sure there will be a lot of you people out there that think that that's crazy, and that's fine. But that's exactly where I sit on it. One texter says, Bowers is elite run after the catch. Bowers makes the game so much easier for Levis. Agreed. I think all these guys do, though, right? Like, I think all these guys help Levis. Alt, which, again, would be my number 1 choice tonight, Alt helps Levis. Neighbors helps Levis. Harrison helps Levis. Bowers helps Levis. I think they all help Levis. To me, I think they all help Levis, and so to say, like, one helps Levis more than the other, I mean, you can make an argue one way or another. One texter says, I don't think any Titan fan out there with any sense would say they wouldn't draft Kelsey or Gronk with a top 10 pick. Agreed. And that's what, again, I see Bowers, the comp that I think I see with Bowers is Shannon Sharp. And the reason why is now he's bigger than Shannon, but I think Shannon was like 245 and Shannon was like 235 and he's 245, but he's undersized for a traditional tight end, but he's really a receiver who plays tight end and then can murder people that are smaller than them. One texter says, here's a question for you. Sometimes when there are busts in the NFL draft, the question is who's to blame, the players, the coach, or the GM? So ultimately, I think this falls at the feet really for all of them, because if the GM drafts a player who doesn't do the work themselves, that'll get the GM fired. And obviously, if the players don't perform, if the coach doesn't coach them up, the coach will get fired. I mean, like, I think that it's kind of a cycle, you know, as far as all that's concerned. That being said, I think a lot of the reason why players get bust in the NFL is because guys don't know how to use them. You know, Floyd said to me the reason why he thinks Javon Curse fell in that draft in 99 was because teams didn't know how to use him because he played everywhere at Florida. But they looked at him and said, you're going to be our right outside defensive end. And obviously the proof was in the pudding. Speaking of Javon Curse, his teammate, Chris Sanders, will join us coming up next. And Chris will be part of the show tonight out here at 6 o'clock at Twin Peaks in Madison. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Twin Peaks in Madison, where once again tonight, 6 o'clock, we got the draft show. And somebody just asked me, they said, do you think that, because I heard you talk about Brock Bowers, do you think they're going to take Joe Alt? I think they're going to take Joe Alt. So that's just my gut feeling. Who knows? Chris Sanders joins us on the program. I know he doesn't know who they're going to take, but Chris, tonight on the draft show, I know you're looking forward to me going crazy when the Titans make the pick at 7. I have a feeling that I'm not going crazy tonight because of all these players that they could pick, whether it's Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, Odunze. I love them all. And if they pick one of them tonight at 7, I'll walk out of here a happy man. Do you think it's that simple, or do you think the Titans' thinking might be more complicated than that?
I mean, it could be complicated because nobody knows, and nobody knows how they ranked all those players. All those players that you just named are all great players and all impact players. But, I was just listening to the interview with Joe Alt yesterday, and I texted you. I said it was impressive. And I just think that when you're picking a player, you want to pick a player that's not just a great athlete, but just a great human being. And just listen to what Joe Alt was saying. I mean, it's everything you want. It's kind of what Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan and those guys want to build. You want to bring players in your building that make everybody around you better. And so if they go with Joe Alt or they go with another player, I just think it's going to be an impact player, whoever it is.
What did you think of the Alt interview?
Man, let me tell you something. I almost jumped out of my seat. I was going to Walgreens to go buy me some Coca-Cola, and I had to stop and pull over because he said this. He talked about fishing. He talked about the coaches. But here's what he said that was so impressive, Jared. He said, I want to be coached. I mean, and you don't get that in NFL because there's a lot of guys that feel like they arrived and, I don't need coaching, I don't need, correction. And he said, I want somebody in my face telling me to get better. So when you have a guy like that wants to be coached, that is already, a great athlete, but you want to be coached, those are the guys that you want in your building.
Chris, when it comes to the 3 wide receivers, the Titans will probably have a shot maybe at one of them. They probably won't have a shot at 2 of the 3. My question for you is there's kind of a sentiment that Rome Odunze has done everything right throughout this draft process. There's some thought that maybe Marvin Harrison's rubbed some people the wrong way, and it looks like Neighbors could be the first receiver off the board. Yeah. In your opinion, for what the Titans want to do, rank the 3 of them. Forget about whether or not they'll be there. Just on your own personal board, how do you see the 3 receivers?
Number one, I will go with Marvin Harrison. The reason why I love Marvin Harrison, I mean, he's a big guy. He's 6'3", 209. But here's what I love that he brings to the game is he catches the ball in tight windows, and he catches the ball with tight coverage. And when you get into the NFL, you're always going to have tight coverage, and he consistently made plays when he was in college. That's the reason why I rank him number 1. And number 2, you can go. I'm gonna go with Malik Neighbors. I mean, just like with him, he's a big physical guy. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, and he's one of those guys that catches the ball and run after the catch. He can run choice routes. He can play, each position in 11 personnel. That's 1 back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers. He can play the X, the H, and actually the Z. So when you have a guy like that with that skill set, he can actually make some plays. And then the guy from Washington, Odunze, I mean, another big guy, 6'3", 212, and he's like that protocol X wide receiver to where you put him on the line and he can beat you with the line of scrimmage. So those how I kind of rate those guys, but at the end of the day, whichever guy you pick, they're still an impact player, and they can score touchdowns for your organization.
Chris Sanders is with us. Chris, do you like J.C. Latham? When Trevor said that he thinks Latham could kick into guard or be more suited for guard, that scared the crap out of me. I just want to know kind of because we have heard a little bit of buzz about the Titans and J.C. Latham, and I wonder what you think of J.C. Latham.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big physical guy. I mean, just like right now, he's been big like this before, 6'6", 360. And the one thing I love about him, he's a mauler. He's a guy that has an attitude. He's big. He's physical. But I think sometimes he's kind of struggled with footwork. And when you have a situation where you're playing guard or tackle, whatever they put him in, you got to make sure you're athletic and have good feet. And I just think that just watching a little bit of his film, he kind of struggles with his feet. But when you got a coach with Bill Callahan that specializes in fixing Kai's skill set, I think that if you bring him in, I think he's going to be an asset for this Tennessee Titans team.
Chris Sanders is with us. Chris, one thing that bothered me the other day when they had the pre-draft press conference is 2 things specifically. Number 1, they had Chad Brinker introduce Rand Carthon, and that leads more to that, so who's in charge, the president or the vice president? Because the president's introducing the vice president, and I hate that. And then the second thing is Rand was asked, is this a Rand pick or is this a group pick? And Rand said this is an us pick. And then talked about how, he didn't see something the way the scouts saw it or the way the coach saw it. And people are going to interpret anything that I say about Rand Carthon as being anti-Rand, and that's not true.
Right.
I want to see Rand Carthon. Like, at the end of the day,
Yes.
I want this to be Rand Carthon's choice.
Yeah.
And I'm worried that the Titans have such a fixation on collaboration and everybody gets a say and everybody that it's going to kind of, that Rand may make a choice that is not necessarily the choice that he wants to make. And I just don't think that's good business. And I'm truly everybody's telling me Rand's great and I am skeptical. Let's see. But I don't like this whole the coaches want us to do this. And so because that receiver coach, he may not be here next year.
Right. Yeah, but see, here's the thing, Rand, and I've been around a lot of great head coaches and a lot of great GMs, but the thing about it is, you want to make sure you involve everybody. I know you don't like that. I know a lot of people don't like that, but at the end of the day, he does make the decision. But before you make the decision, you got to get all your information, not just from a receiver coach or a line coach. You got to get it from your pro scout guys. But at the end of the day, I know he's going to make the right decision. But if you do it alone and you try to do it by yourself and say, okay, I got it, y'all stay over there and I stay over here, then you're really not building the team. You're making it about yourself. And I think with Rand Carthon and just listening to his press conference, I actually love what he's doing. The reason why I love what he's doing is because he's gathered all the information from all the pro scouts and all the coaches that he has. Say, okay, you know what? I got all the information and it's sitting right in front of me. Then now, as the general manager, I got to go make a decision. I just think it's pretty good that he's involving everybody else.
So what you just said is exactly what I think they need to do, but I'm worried that that's not exactly what's going to happen. See, I agree. Yeah. I think Rand should have an open mind and should listen to his scouts and should listen to his coaches. But then when it's time, well, I want Rand Carthon to be like, let's say, there was a player. Did you ever play with Byron Mix?
Byron Nix?
Brian Mix?
No, I don't think I played with him.
Defensive tackle. So
Floyd I did.
Okay, so Floyd talked about him as, I think he was like the 38th pick or something, and he regretted the pick because he made it because everybody, the scouts and all the coaches told him, hey, you got to pick this guy, and he didn't see it. But he was like, well, everybody's telling me that they love this guy, so it must be something there, so pick him. And he regretted that because he didn't feel it. And my point is, I agree. Rand should talk this over with Brian Callahan, and it should be Brian, how do you see using Brock Bowers if we do this? But at the end of the day, if I were the GM, we'd be going down swinging with my opinion. I'd be open to what everybody has to say. And, you've seen how some of these ex-GMs and some of these people on TV have said things that, TD says things that kind of sway my opinion on certain players. But at the end of the day, and I'm worried that Rand's not going to do that. That he's going to make sure to go, well, everybody else, so let's, we're a team, so let's. And I'm like, if I'm getting fired over this, it's going to be over my guy.
That's a good observation. But here's the thing. If you look at Rand Carthon's track record, he was ahead of Pro Scout. And the reason why he was ahead of Pro Scout is because he did his homework. So now you get in a situation to where everybody's talking about, okay, we want to get this guy. This guy is great for our organization. That's where Rand, as a general manager, has to do his homework. Go back and look at film. Look and see if he can fix the scheme. Is he a good guy? All these things that he has to do. And I'm going to kind of put this in a picture to where people can understand. I coach for Montgomery Bell Academy, and our head coach, Marty Everard, he makes the decision, but he involves everybody else. But now, when we're in a game, when everybody's making noise, he'll be like, okay, y'all need to be quiet. I need to make the decision. And I think that might come a point in time to where Rand Carthon is hearing a lot of noise, but then he's going to have to make the decision. So at the end of the day, he is the general manager. He is in charge. He's going to get all the information. He's going to do all his homework, and I think he's going to come up with the right decision because the job's on the line.
I hope you're right. Chris Sanders, as always, joining us. Chris, we will see you at 6 o'clock tonight.
Can't wait to see you, brother. Love you, man.
Love you too. Later. Chris Sanders, as always, on our program. We hop right to TD. My favorite part of draft day is the TD Power Hour at 3 o'clock, where we'll start with pick number 7 and we'll work our way through. TD joins us next here on the program, live from Twin Peaks in Madison, Stillman & Company on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, Twin Peaks and Madison tonight, where the draft show kicks off in 3 hours at 6 o'clock. And, of course, the draft kicks off in 4 at 7 o'clock, and there is no better time of the year to have TD on than on the draft Thursday every year for the TD Power Hour presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook. TD, first off the top, I want to make an announcement. The first being that we're going to do 2 segments today and then 2 segments of questions for TD, because I figure on draft day that people want to ask TD the questions, and we want to hear you talk more than me. And the second one is this. We keep hearing all this stuff coming out about the Titans. You know, the Diana Rossini thing yesterday, that they love Marvin Harrison Jr. Today, Charles Robinson said they love J.C. Latham. And I'm like, these are all things TD said a month and a half ago on the program, so everything that's now starting to come out has already been said by you.
Yeah, funny how that works, right?
So with that, I want to ask you this question. What are you hearing about the 7th pick? What are you feeling about the 7th pick tonight?
Yeah, I think, it's strange. I think they stay put and make the pick, unless there's going to have to be a crazy offer, because, you look at, the idea of adding another top 100 pick, that's obviously in the 3rd round. I think they feel they could still get players throughout, the draft, even if they don't have a 3rd round pick. I'll also say this, 38, pick number 38 is going to be interesting. And even if they move back off of it, their 2nd pick is going to be interesting tomorrow. And there's an assortment of guys that I think are going to be in the mix. And, don't be surprised if a guy ends up being the pick by the name of, he's someone we talked about too, Jared. T'Vondre Sweat. I think there's a good chance that he's picked there.
It's funny because as you were talking, you were like, yeah, we've talked about it. I was writing down Keon Coleman.
Yeah. I think Keon Coleman, I tell you, some stuff with him. I'll be very surprised if the Ravens or Bills don't take him, honestly. Mm-hmm. He's visited with them. The Bills have been, dating back to the Combine, the Bills have been very, very heavy on Keon Coleman. So that is something to consider there.
Do you think that the ability or the availability of who might be there at 38 has any effect at all on what they do at 7? For instance, if they're sitting there and let's say it's Alt and Neighbors are both on the board, that the Titans would say, well, the quality of player at 38 that they may be able to get might be better at receiver than tackle, so let's take Alt. Or the quality at tackle is better than receiver, so let's take Neighbors. Or do you think this is strictly who would you rather have on your football team, Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt?
I think it's who would you rather have, honestly, and that's the big question, right? Malik Neighbors versus Joe Alt. And those guys are probably, when you look realistically at the options that they could have at their disposal, those are the top 2. I think what the Chargers do is going to have such an impact, and even the Cardinals too, because, look, man, if Marvin Harrison is there, that's the pick, but I don't think he makes it to 7. So you go with the next best receiver who we already know that they like, considering all the time that they've spent with him. I don't know which direction it's going to go, but I definitely feel it's going to be, if those guys are there, that's the pick, and whatever happens in the 2nd round just happens.
So my theory is on that front, that decision will be made for you.
Yes.
It's like, okay, so if, for instance, the Chargers take Alt, and I don't think they're going to take him, but if they do, then it's like, well, maybe that pushes Neighbors to the Titans at 7. The fear, though, is it's the 3 quarterbacks, Harrison, Alt, and Neighbors, and then you're on the clock, and it's at Adunze and Bowers and those guys, which are still great players, but it takes you away from the Neighbors and Alt discussion.
Yeah, and that would be a very interesting. I think in that situation, right, I think they go Neighbors, Latham. If Neighbors, Alt, and obviously Harrison are gone, I think they would go Latham. The trade back is still an option, but, it takes 2 to tango. Rand Carthon, when he spoke the other day at the press conference, when I asked him about the trading back, he said teams have been nosy, but you look at when Joe Schoen was asked about it, and he was like, yeah, absolutely, we've been getting calls. So 2 different approaches, right? So maybe that number 6 pick is getting more interest than the number 7.
Do you think that, as far as you brought up Latham, as if those two guys are off, do you think that they don't, that, what do you, I'm not going to say what you, what do you think they feel on Bowers and Odunze?
Bowers, I know, is very intriguing, and it's one of those things where it's like, I would hate to miss out on that and have him end up being such a dynamic, big-time playmaker. So you do have that. Odunze, I don't think that there's as much interest in Odunze as there is in Harrison Jr. and Neighbors, as there is in Bowers. If he's staring them at the face, right there, staring at them, at 7, it's something that they'll consider, but that's a prime option for a team like the Bears if they want to move up, or one of those teams that could use a big-time receiver that's prime for them to move up.
Do you think Olu Fashanu is completely out of the discussion?
No.
Unless they trade back into 11, 12, 13?
Yeah, I think moving back, and getting him is something. Like, you look at Denver, you look at Vegas. If they want to move up and get one of the quarterbacks, right, McCarthy or what have you, then I think that's when Olu Fashanu is an option.
I am fascinated by the J.C. Latham stuff. You've been talking about Latham for probably about a month and a half as somebody the Titans have interest in. And now we're seeing the mock drafts that are starting. The buzz is Latham at 5 to the Chargers. Now, I heard Caroline say today that she talked to somebody who said that I guess people in the league are kind of wondering if Joe Ortiz has, his relationship with Daniel Jeremiah, if that's kind of where this is coming from, and then the why. Why would the Chargers be telling people they're thinking Latham? Do you think it's possible they go Latham at 5? Can you go Latham at 5 in a draft that would have Marvin Harrison or Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt on the board?
Let me ask you, Jeremiah, he had them taking Latham in his mock, right? In his latest mock? Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of people think this kind of came from, was that Ortiz-Jeremiah relationship. I guess they were scouts together in Baltimore, I think.
Not only that, Daniel Jeremiah does their preseason, just like Charles Davis does the preseason here. You know what I mean? So that is very interesting that he did say that. I think it's feasible, honestly, and I think when you look at Latham, you look at the athleticism, you look at the size, he's no slouch of a prospect. And then you also look at the depth at wide receiver. Remember, the Chargers are coming back at the top of the second round. They could have a pick of Xavier Legette. They could have, A.D. Mitchell at their disposal also. You look at the thing with the diabetes, which is ridiculous, this thing that's coming out about A.D. Mitchell, that he's
So I don't know anything about this other than I think it's bull crap.
Yeah, so here's what is coming out about him. And the guy he's a Green Bay, long time. Bob McGinn. His report is that A.D. Mitchell is diabetic, but when he's not very diligent with taking his medication, and when he doesn't take his medication and his sugar is off, he's hard to manage. So there are issues with his availability during the week to practice, and it was something that plagued him, at both schools that he was at in college.
So I heard the same report, and I think that's bullcrap. I think that's a team putting that out there.
Yeah.
Because
it's unfortunate.
They want him to fall, and I have my suspicions about who that is, by the way.
Okay.
I think it's Carolina. So I've heard a little bit of scuttlebutt. I wouldn't say enough scuttlebutt to, point the finger and accuse the Panthers of being the ones to leak the S2 CJ Stroud test scores. But there's some scuttlebutt that that has been told to me that it could be Carolina that was the team last year that leaked the S2 score about CJ Stroud because they were going to take Bryce Young, so they wanted to make it look like it was a no-brainer or whatever. And that was leaked to Bob McGinn. And Carolina doesn't have a pick in the first round, but they do have 33.
Right.
And, there's all this thought about Buffalo could go A.D. Mitchell at 28, or Kansas City at 32 could go A.D. Mitchell, or something like that. So maybe something like this a little bit. And I heard
push
Jim
him down
and Pat.
a little bit.
Jim and Pat were talking about this report like, oh, yeah, no, this is absolutely the truth. And so this means that maybe he'll have to learn the hard way and fall into the second round. I'm like, guys, you're falling for the trap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are two veterans right there, PK and Jim Miller. So,
I know. They know the game.
They know the game. Pat Caron was a former GM. He drafted Keyshawn Johnson, signed Wayne Corbett.
They know the game.
Yeah.
And but I think the A.D. Mitchell thing, like if I'm the Titans, I would even be thinking about, like, let's say you take Alt at 7 and Mitchell's there at like 30. I think about it. Now, there's going to be so many good receivers that you probably shouldn't trade back in, but I got no problem as far as A.D. Mitchell's concerned with that report. That doesn't bother me at all.
No, it doesn't
I think
bother
it's
me
fake.
either. I would stay put. Though I wouldn't move up. I think if they move up, it should be, for one of those edge guys, or, if a guy like Johnny Newton is there, you move up and you grab him, because you really need to invest in this defensive line and get Jeffrey Simmons some help.
TD is with us for the TD Power Hour. Again, we're going to do 2 segments of phone, so 615-737-1025, get them in now. And TD brought up trade backs. So he said, it'll take a lot. What is a lot? We'll do that next here on the program. Stillman and Company, TD with us, presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook, 102.5, 106 The Game.
when you look at your pick at 7, have teams been nosy, as you would call it, or are you guys open for business there?
No, it's still people are nosy, and I think we owe it, to our organization. I owe it to Coach Callahan and his staff to, listen to all calls, no matter where they fall, just to see if it's anything enticing. If it's anything that's going to, blow us away to make us really want to, trade back. But we're just listening at this point.
Where are you, as far as prospects are concerned? Like, do you have ones that, hey, I don't care what the offer is, like this is a guy we would take?
Short answer, yes.
There you go. That was Rand Carthon. And I think the long answer is, I guess if you want Marvin Harrison from me, you can trade your entire draft and all of next year's picks, and then you can get Marvin Harrison from me.
Yeah.
And even then, that might not be enough. But the short answer is, if Marvin Harrison is there, they're going to take him. So, TD, you just sent me Peter Schrager's mock draft that has the Titans trading back with Minnesota to 11 and taking Joe Alt, but they don't end up with 23, which is their other pick, which – it's hard for me to envision that. So you've said that if the Titans move off 7, you think it's going to be for a big old haul. So Minnesota, Denver, the Raiders, New Orleans. Let's start with Minnesota at 11. They've got 11, 23, a 4th at 108, a 5th and 2 6ths, and then everybody's got 7ths, but who cares about that?
Right.
What would it take, in your opinion, to move from 7 to 11, given the quality of player that we know is going to be there at 7, no matter who gets taken ahead of the Titans?
Yeah, I think that 11 and 23, I think that gets the job done. Because, 2 first-round picks. And there's a chance, if they we don't even know if Joe Alt is one of their top 5 guys, right? We don't know that. We don't. But let's say that they want Joe Alt. They could possibly get him at 11. Because you look at the Falcons, Dallas Turner will probably be the pick. You look at the Jets, and I know that's going to be tough. But the Bears, I think they go ahead and they continue their receiver import, you know what I mean, and go Adunze. And then, and by the way, Adunze and Caleb Williams flew to Detroit together. And then you look at the Jets at 10, Brock Bowers. I think they could go at 11 and still get Joe Alt. And if they don't get Alt, you get Fashanu, and that's not bad. And then at 23, it's like, what do you want? You know what I mean? You want Brian Thomas Jr.? Okay. You want Johnny Newton? Okay. If you want Terry and Arnold, you could do that. Who knows
Byron
who
Murphy.
could be? Byron Murphy. I think Sweat is a better player than Murphy, but that's just me.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will stand on that 10 toes, But, yeah, I think 23 could be intriguing.
Okay, Denver at 12. They have 12, no second rounder. They've got a third rounder at 76, a fourth rounder, and 2 5s. What would it take for you to move with Denver at 12?
Yeah, I would say 12, 76, and next year's 1. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's at a minimum. Think about it. Like, you're asking me to come off of a chance to get a legit top 10 player. You know what I mean? And there's a chance you could still get a guy on the borderline at 12, but yeah.
Okay, the Raiders at 13 have 13, 44, 77 in the third. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have all their picks this year. What would it take for you to move to 13?
Yeah, I would say 13, 44, and 77, and, a third next year.
What's crazy is that if I make that trade, say I make 7 for 13, 44, 77, I'm immediately picking up the phone after I make that trade. I'm calling Chicago, and I'm saying, okay, how do I get to 9? Because if it takes me 13 plus 77 plus 106 to get back to 9 to take Alt, for instance, or something like that, I would be willing to deal the 4th and the 3rd, but then I also get 44 in the deal too.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's a Monty Ossenfort type of maneuver there, but yeah, that would make sense there because ideally what you're doing is you're generating a top 60 pick. Now you're really cooking when you do that.
New Orleans only has 14, 45, and they don't pick again until the 5th round. Does New Orleans have enough firepower for you to move all the way back to 14?
They would have to, use some of their picks next year. They would. It would take, New Orleans, I want 14, 45, and I want a first next year. Like that's what I want. You're moving up 7 picks. Like you're moving into the top 10.
And if you're the Titans, you move to 14. Like if you move, say, to 11, you can still probably there's a chance Bowers there's a chance Alt's there. There's a chance one of those high-end players. There's probably not a chance that any of those guys are there at 14.
Yeah, it's very, very unlikely that they're there. Now you're looking at that Olu, Fashanu. But it's like, okay, Olu, and then what? You know what I mean?
Sure.
You're really caught with your pants down if someone else surprises you and takes Olu. That's the risk there of moving to 14. You know what I mean? So, that would be it. I would definitely need next year's first round at the minimum.
So I do think the one thing about Alt that I wonder is it does feel like Titan fans absolutely love Joe Alt, and it's hard not to love him.
I think you love him too, right?
I love them. I mean, you talk to him. I talk to him.
Hey, listen, all it takes – remember when I came back from the combine, remember the first thing I said to you? I was like, yo, man, that dude Joe Alt, man, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It just takes one conversation, and you're like, jeez.
I'm like, this is a team captain type kid that I'm talking to here. And the question I have is, if you're the Titans and you're not that high on Alt, and we don't know how high they are. You know, you brought up, is he in their top 5? Is he? Would it not have been wise to put a little cold water on Alt, you know, with the media, you know, kind of saying like the Titans like Joe Alt, but they don't love Joe Alt or something like that, just so that the fans don't go crazy if the Titans are sitting there at 7 and say they take J.C. Latham over Joe Alt?
It could be some damage control, but I think at the end of the day, when you're taking J.C. Latham over Joe Alt, it's not to impress the fans right now. It's to make them feel good when this team is winning because you believe that he's the guy that can help you win. It's a lot like you look back in the day, Donovan McNabb. Like everybody wanted the Eagles to draft Ricky Williams. And, they didn't do it. They drafted McNabb, and he got booed. You know, and I would like to say McNabb put a good footprint on that team.
Well, and it's like the GM used to say, you listen to the fans, pretty soon you're sitting with the fans.
Yeah.
And then again, I don't know if you'd be sitting with the fans if you take Joe Alt, but that's just, I mean, Alt is he's an elite prospect just like all these other guys are elite
very
prospects.
much
And then
so.
now you're splitting hairs at this point. Okay, enough of me. I promised 2 segments of questions for TD. We're doing it next. 615-737-1025. Get your thoughts in for TD, and we'll get right to them. Stillman and Company live out of Twin Peaks in Madison, where the draft show starts tonight at 6 o'clock with Chris, Derek, and Trevor right here, 1025, 1063 The Game. Live out of Twin Peaks in Madison. Again, the draft show is tonight at 6 o'clock. Chris Sanders will be here. Derek Mason will be here. Trevor Matich will be here. And we want to pack this place. Again, I think like 150 people can fit in here. So come on out starting at 6 o'clock tonight. And if you think your wife will not want you to do that, just say you're hanging out with the guys. Jared, Derek, Chris, Trevor. Then just tell them that. And I'll keep an eye. Just tell them that, it'll be okay. I do want to say before we get to the questions for TD, Mark Dominic, former NFL general manager, SiriusXM, will join us at the top of the next hour at 4 o'clock. So with that, TD, we got a lot of phones for you today.
Let's go.
Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Sean has been waiting patiently and is going to kick us off today. Sean, you're on with TD. Go ahead.
Hello, fellas. First of all, guys, I'd like to make this comment that I think the Titans need to stay with their number 7 pick and take Brock Bowers over Joe Alt. I realize that Joe Alt is a franchise player, which basically means a lifer. Well, let's be honest. The NFL right now is all about turnover. It's about winning now. The game has moved to an aerial offense, hence that's why the Titans got rid of Derrick Henry, moved on, picked up Ridley and keeping, what's his name, from Houston. So it looks like they're moving toward the offense. I think nothing better for Will Levis to have a safe guard there with Brock Bowers, kind of like Steve McNair did with Frank Wycheck. I want to see what you think. If there's any way they'll get Bowers. I think he went up against SEC competition, which is pretty close to NFL. He proved himself. I think the Titans need to go that route. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that. That's a really good call too. I like how he, identified something that's against the grain and backed it up. And I think when you look at Brock Bowers, and there's a chance that he could be the guy that they pick. I think when you look at him, you have to go beyond just the tight end position. It's just like last year what I said about Tajay Spears when everybody said, "Oh, how do you draft a running back in the 3rd round?" You're not drafting a running back. You're drafting a playmaker. That's what Bowers is, and he's a guy. And I asked him this at the Combine about how he gives matchup problems to opposing teams, and that's exactly what he does because he's too big for a lot of safeties, too fast for a lot of linebackers. You could flex him. He could line up in line. You could get the free yards with him, and you can line him up over the numbers and win. It's very similar to the situation you see with George Kittle that you see with Travis Kelce.
Well, and I brought up the idea earlier because people had said, well, they don't use the tight end very much in Cincinnati. And I'm like, I think he's kind of like he would play the Tyler Boyd position, in this offense and move around more than Boyd, but kind of do the things that they ask. And people are like, well, you're saying you want to take Tyler Boyd with the 7? No. I want to take a guy who, when he's out there.
Yeah, it's an advanced version of it. Yeah.
Right. Let's run the same route for Tyler Boyd, throw the ball to him, and then the DB that can tackle Tyler Boyd, he runs over and runs in the end zone for a touchdown.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Let's go. And by the way, he says Mark Dominic is coming on at 4 o'clock. And he calls Mark Dominic and says that Dominic will sit there and go all in with him. Let's go to Graham, who's up next here on the TD Power Hour. Graham, you're on with TD.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We got you.
All right, sweet. I just had a quick question for TD. Do you see any A.J. Brown level, shocking draft trades tonight? Not specifically for the Titans, but any other teams in the draft tonight. I know T. Higgins was want to be traded. Even A.J. Brown was causing some drama last couple of games of the season. Twitter drama. Devontae Adams probably not being happy in the Raiders right now. So I want to know if you see any shocking drafts like that tonight.
Yeah, I think you called it with T. Higgins. I think that's one. Brandon Ayuk, that's going to be an interesting situation. I could see those two would be the shocking ones. But, man, I'll never forget that. I shame on that caller, man. You brought back bad feelings. I'm feeling good on draft day, but you brought back bad feelings because, my feelings were legitimately hurt. And I try to be objective. But, Jared, I took a strong liking to A.J. We got really cool, and I hated to see him go. So shame on you, caller, for bringing that up. You also, at the time, well, when you were doing the show with us that night, you were like, this is a bad decision by the Titans. It was terrible. Yeah, it was terrible. We saw how that played out. Yeah. Let's go to Jules, who's up next here on the TD Power Hour. Jules, you're on with TD.
Hey, guys. I really appreciate y'all taking my call. I wanted to get straight to the point. TD, what specific detail in Alt's game puts him above the other tackle prospects in this year's draft? Thank y'all.
Okay.
Thank you, Jules.
That's a great question, Jules. I appreciate that. And what, for me specifically, he's better now, and he has just as much upside. We forget Joe Alt has only played this position 2-3 years. You know what I mean? And you look at him now, and he's so technically sound after playing the position 3 years. Imagine what he can become if you take Bill Callahan and you put him in that. Imagine what he could become. So for me, it's better now and just as much upside. I think, he's very athletic. He's technically sound. He's not that guy that, is your breathing down the throat, grabbing somebody and throwing them out the club type, but he's just going to smoothly get you out the way. And I think he does the job. So for me, he's better than Olu for those reasons.
So I think about it like this, because people will say, well, do you need that kind of player when you have Bill Callahan? And I say, okay, would you rather have the elite coach with an average quarterback? Think of Bill Walsh, right? Would you rather have him with an average quarterback, or would you rather have him with Joe Montana? Because when he's got when the elite coach has the elite player, that's when you turn somebody into a superstar.
And to me, this is the rare match where you have the best prospect at the position with tremendous upside that's really good right now, and you have one of the best coaches. I can't call him the best because I believe so much in Jeff Stoutland. So I'll say one of the two best O-line coaches in the league. It's a perfect match.
Don't get me too excited, because I don't want to be disappointed if they don't take Joe Alt tonight. Let's go to Mark, who's up next here on the program. Mark, you're on with TD. Thank you for calling and waiting. Go ahead.
How you boys doing?
What's going on?
Here's my question. Last year, there was a lot of talk about us possibly trading up the Cardinals for C.J. Stroud. That did not happen, obviously, because we now have Will. Is there any chance, and it's a wild card, anything can happen on the draft. I've seen it over and over again. Is there any chance that Tennessee could trade up and go after Marvin Harrison Jr.? Do you think there's any chance of that?
It's a great question. I would say there's always a chance. I don't think it happens just because this team isn't a Marvin Harrison Jr. away from being successful. That's the sole reason. But make no mistake about it, Marvin Harrison Jr. is somebody that they love in that building. Love him.
Do you think he's number one on their board?
I mean, if you go I think he is.
I just, when it comes to the idea of trading up for Marvin Jr., I think in a different draft where there aren't as many good players that will be there at 7, maybe that's a discussion. Like if the drop-off is at 5, then maybe there's the discussion of, well, we want to make sure we try to get up, and, it's not as hard to get up from 7 to 4. But in this case, it's like what you'd have to get up to get to 4, as opposed to just taking Joe Alt or just taking Brock Bowers or Malik Neighbors, to me doesn't make it worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you could stick at 7 and get a guy who many consider is a top 5 player. And there could be multiple bites at the apple, whether it's Neighbors, Adunze, Alt, Bowers. There's a lot that you could do there. So, yeah, I don't think it happens this year.
More phones for TD, 615-737-1025. This was an audible that I made, and it was the right one. More of your phones for TD for a second segment, which we will do on draft night live from Twin Peaks, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's talk about Window Nation. That's right, Window Nation. I love Window Nation. So Window Nation has a free in-home estimate, right? So if you're looking at your windows and they won't open for fresh air, they won't seal tight to keep out the pollen and the bugs, and you're sneezing. I think my puppy, by the way, has allergies because he's been sneezing a lot. So I know I have allergies, so I know it's bad. If you are thinking, you know what, let's redo the windows here. Let's make the house look better. Let's save on our energy costs, and let's do something that we need to do anyways. Give Window Nation a call, because you can get that free in-home estimate. And say you buy some windows because you need to replace your windows. For every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 free. There is no limit on how much you could save. Plus, save even more with no interest or payments for 24 months. Again, 2 windows you buy, 2 windows are free. It's as simple as that. No interest or payments for 24 months. Do not miss out. Call 866-90-NATION. That's 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. Again, windownation.com to schedule your free in-home estimate. A segment ago, a caller asked TD about specific trades we could see tonight, shockers, and TD, we got a little developing story maybe happening ahead of the draft.
Mike Silver, he's reporting that the 49ers are receiving a lot of calls, not only about Ayuk, they're also receiving calls about Deebo Samuel. Interesting.
When I hear somebody says they're receiving calls, what I think that means is, hey, if you want to call us, we'll take it.
Yeah. And if it's coming from Mike Silver, like in our text thread just now, it's coming from the 49ers. He's incredibly Matt Miyoko, those are probably the most plugged in guys in the Bay Area.
Dre is up next here as we hit the questions for TD, presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Dre, you're on with TD. Go ahead.
What's going on, guys? How y'all doing on a draft eve, man?
What's up? What's up?
Hey, check this out. I have a question for you, TD. This is just a straight-out hypothetical. All right, now we have Marvin Harris, right? We have Joe Alt. Let's say 4 years from now, they reached their pinnacle. Who they were drafted to be. Which one would be more apt to be available if you wanted to sign one of them after their rookie contract is up? Which one would it be, Alt or Harrison? Which one would be available to a team that needed a receiver or a lineman?
I would probably say Harrison Jr. because you just
Thank
don't
you.
see, especially left tackles. You don't see them on the market.
That's why you do not pass on this kid.
Well, here's what I would say, though, is that did you notice that St. Brown signed for more money than Sewell, even though Sewell got more guaranteed yesterday? I was like, that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, that money, that part of it is kind of funny, though. You know what I mean?
True.
Yeah.
Fair. You know what? You're right. You're right, TD.
Yeah, I look, and that's the thing, and even like when we did our mock on ESPN NFL Nation, on ESPN2 there, that's one of the things I said, man. You draft Joe Alt, you put him next to last year's first-round pick Peter Skoronski, and now you have that left side. It's secured for years to come. Those two guys, they're 10-year players for your team. You know what I mean? You don't fool with that.
You know what's crazy is, did you see the workout video of Skoronski?
No.
So they showed one of the things from the little voluntary mini camp that they're having or whatever. And Skoronski looks like he's been hitting the buffet. And you know how I feel about my interior offensive linemen.
Oh, you like them fat.
I love them fat. I mean, put those cows out on the farm. I was really hard on Peter last year, given where he was taken, and I expect Peter to have a much better year this year. I know this. I know the idea of a Joe Alt would be very appealing to Skoronski, especially with Lloyd Cushenberry already in there.
Yeah, think about that, man. Oof. Very nice.
And then if Peter doesn't make it with Bill Callahan coaching him and with those two guys next to him, then it is what it is. But, the situation, the ability to succeed, I think will certainly be much higher for him this year.
Yeah. No, I think he'll be fine.
Let's go to Kyle, who's up next here on the program. Kyle, you've been waiting patiently. You're on with TD.
Hey, guys. Good to talk to you. Well, Jared, I just realized something waiting on hold. Are you going to be on the radio/YouTube TV from 2 to basically 11 today?
Yes.
Putting in the work, man.
As TD can attest, it's not that I have a hard time talking or staying awake, but it's like a pitcher in baseball. I don't have a hard time throwing fast. I have a hard time controlling it once I start to tire a little bit, and that's when some of the wild stuff happens.
If anybody can do it, you can, brother.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, TD, if somehow we come away with Malik Neighbors at 7, what do you think we do or should do at left tackle?
You sign Andrews, Pete. I think, Andrews.
Thank you, Kyle.
Andrews, Pete. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you. I think Andrews, Pete should be on speed dial if that's the case. But you could still come back at 38. I just don't know who will be there because you look at Jordan Morgan. I saw the 49ers taking him at 31. You look at Patrick Paul and what he's come out, Jordan Schultz, as well as he himself have said, hey, look, I'm going to go higher than you guys think. So teams are pumping his agent up with the idea. So it'll be tough at 38. They may not have that much to pick from, but that's why I think you sign Andrews, Pete. 479 snaps last year, left tackle, 2 sacks.
I mean, I would argue that I think that if the Titans end up taking a receiver tonight and then they end up signing Andrews Pete or whatever, that they'll be okay. I mean, I think that to the point you brought up earlier, This is not about, okay, well, what can we get at 38 and what can we – it's like, okay, who would you rather have on your team, Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt? That's the question.
And
that's there.
In that case, they would pick Neighbors in that case.
TD,
it's going to be interesting.
We got a couple of texts in here about if the Titans draft a receiver, do you foresee perhaps a Traylon Burks trade at some point?
It's possible. It's possible. I don't know though, because he's not taking up a whole lot of money. Obviously, he was a first round pick. I would say possible, but not likely.
Texter says, TD, Joe Alt to the Titans. I'm confident, but are you confident given that the Chargers did not use a top 30 visit on Joe Alt?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I haven't gotten anything from the multiple people that I talk to say he's the pick. You know what I mean? I haven't gotten that. Everything is like, we know he's good. We know he's good. But I wonder about this guy. I wonder about that guy. So we'll see. We'll see.
But TD, you know what makes me think that they're sitting there saying, Lord, please let Joe Alt be there at 7.
Yeah.
And then when you're like, hey man, what do you think about Joe Alt? Oh yeah, we kind of like him a little bit. We're not, we're fine with him. Like that's how I interpret that.
It's so much posturing that you run into. So yeah, I could see that as a possibility too. And again, like I've said over and over again, that's what's so fun about this draft, man. It's so unpredictable, and you could know whoever and still not really know what's going to happen.
Okay, so I think it's no secret that Rand Carthon has a lot of respect for you. You have a lot of respect for Rand Carthon. You have a lot of respect for the Titans. Titans have a lot of respect for you.
Mm-hmm.
If they flat out lied to you, like if they looked at your face and he said, TD, I would take Malik Neighbors over Joe Alt, and they're sitting there today, and all of a sudden they're like, the Titans take Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors, would you pick up the phone and say, what the hell? Or would you say, like, hey, man, got to play the game?
I would say it this way. If I didn't talk to all three of if I didn't talk to Chad Brinker, Anthony Robinson, and Rand, or, whoever, if I didn't talk to multiple people, I would say, hey, why are you lying to me? But one person, if it's just, if it's one person that says that, it's like, okay, well, you're only one person in the equation. You know what I mean?
I do. As far as that's concerned, though, I want this to be Rand's pick. You know what I mean? Like, take all the information from everybody, but, have that, hey, at the end of the day, we're going to do what I want to do. And not John Robinson, where it's like, I'm not interested in what everybody else has to say. But, like, I worry about Rand, feeling one way about a player and then everybody else saying, well, but we like this guy and we like him a little more than him. And then Rand's kind of in that no man's land of, well, I do like that player, but I don't like him as much as this guy. And then you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think that's all the way the case, though. And I know because of how the structure is set up, it could cause, some confusion and stuff like that. But I do very much think that Rand Carthon is in control. And I think, this is his draft, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't go right, it's going to be him on the underneath the guillotine, not these other guys. It's going to be him, and I think there's an understanding there, and he has the opportunity to veto or yes, approve a pick. And I think just at the end of the day, because of who Rand is and how much he is a team player. Mm-hmm. He's going to consider everything. Like it's not going to be, it's me, it's my way or the highway. It's not going to be that. I think there is definitely going to, even talking to the different scouts, over the last year and a half, they've said that he's been very considerate of them and having them involved. So this is going to be an organizational decision.
It reminds me, I told the story earlier, I don't know if you heard this, the Byron mix.
Yeah, I did hear that.
And that the old man was like, I just don't see it, but everybody tells me, so I'll take it. I think it was the Eddie George draft. I think he was the second pick in the Eddie George draft. And he was like, yeah, I made that. He's like, if I don't like him, I'm not taking him. And that's what kind of the thing I want from Rand, which is if everybody likes him and you like him, and it's like, well, I like this guy and I like this guy. And then, Brian Callahan says, I really feel like I can use this guy this way. Like, okay, But if it's like, I don't really like him, but everybody likes him, don't take him.
I don't think that he would do that. I don't think that they would take somebody that he just flat out doesn't like. Just because of how respected his mind, his eye for football is, I don't think that would be the case.
And then the other thing, too, I think we can all agree on, like, if I'm, you may only get one shot at this. If I'm going down swinging, it's going to be on my guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in Rand's case, look, let's face the facts. Black GMs typically is one and done, baby. You either you get it right or and get to go on, or you don't. You know what I mean? So
I haven't even thought about that. I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head, like, I don't think Bobby Greer got a second chance.
Look at the Giants won Super Bowls with Jerry Reese as their GM, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just saying, Trent Baalke got a second chance in Jacksonville. I'm just saying, and that's just calling a spade a spade. Like,
sure.
You know what I mean? So I definitely think that you have to go about this like, man, this is my shot. Like, I got to make this thing work, because if it doesn't, I don't know that another opportunity is coming.
TD, last one for you. I'm putting you on the hot seat right now.
Oh.
What happens tonight at 7?
It's just hard to think that Joe Alt isn't the pick. It's just hard to think that he isn't. I understand, guys like Malik Neighbors are attractive and everything. I think it's Alt. I think they picked Joe Alt.
I don't think Neighbors is going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that answer is going to be made for you.
Okay. TD is putting it down, saying Joe Alt, that's his gut for today. That's my gut, too, for what it's worth. TD, tell us about ESPN Bet Sportsbook.
Yeah, for sure, ESPN Bet Sportsbook. I signed up and made a couple bets last night on OKC versus New Orleans. So it's definitely, I'm not just a talker. I'm a client as well. But ESPN Bet is ready to take you through all the huge sports moments this spring, the exclusive sportsbook at ESPN, and it has it all, including offers and promotions for Scott Van Pelt and Stephen A. Smith. From the playoff intensity to getting on the links and out to the ballpark, there's no better time to be a sports fan than right now. And as a new user, you get $100 in bonus bets for making any sportsbook bet. I got $100 last night. Download ESPN Bet today. What a play. You must be 21 or older and in Tennessee. For problem gambling support, call or text the TM Red Line at 800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. See the app for details.
Former NFL GM Mark Dominic joins us next. His thoughts on the Titans at 7. TD, great stuff. We'll talk to you soon. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 of the game. Stillman and Company live out at Twin Peaks in Madison. It is draft day. And so, again, we're going deep. We got TD, with the Power Hour and everything. But, of course, former NFL general manager Mark Dominic, kind enough to join us, Nashville resident, who will be part of Sirius XM's NFL draft coverage. Mark, happy draft to you. And I know that tonight you're excited for, just what excites you the most as a GM about tonight?
Yeah, it's watching the moves that people are going to make. It's the decisions you've been thinking about for 300 plus days and putting yourself in position to really change your franchise. And that's the emotion that comes to you as a GM, is you realize that your decisions now can really impact where your club's going to go in 2 years, 1 year, or 5 years. You can see what happened with Houston last year in just one season, how they've been able to turn things around, and you can see what's happened with Kansas City with the pick of just one player. And so all that being said, it is a lot of emotions, but it's as long as you feel like you have to wait as a fan or as a player, you feel like you're waiting twice as long as a GM because you're just so excited about the opportunity in front of you.
All right, so put yourself in Rand Carthon's shoes at 7. And I wonder this question. One, how do you feel, given what the elite players in this draft look like and you've got the 7th pick? And two, how much of this are you walking into the draft thinking, I need to build this around Will Levis?
Yeah, well, I think you have to do that. And I think the most important thing you've got to look at is the two things that I fundamentally believe in. That's finding the quarterback and then protecting the quarterback. And then you attack, whether you attack the quarterback or you attack players. And so I think the big thing is, obviously, with the Titans is, Rand went out and spent big money on Lloyd Cushenberry to really solidify the center spot. But there's still a big hiccup on this team in terms of the tackle, and that's going to be something that you're going to have to wait and look into see. And so I think it depends on how the board falls for them. But this is a very strong wide receiver class in the top 40, top 50. I think it's a very strong offensive tackle class in the top 40, top 50. And I think that's got to factor into your thought process a little bit based off of who goes in front of you in those top 6 picks.
How much does the guru factor of having Bill Callahan as the offensive line coach affect you as the GM? For instance, you're talking about, the top 50 tackles in this class. The Titans will have a 2nd pick at 38. I mean, you've obviously been on record saying that Brock Bowers is a guy you'd target if you were the Titans, and You've also said you got to get tackle right. So would you look at this and say, well, I can pass on Joe Alt at 7 because I've got the guru Bill Callahan as an offensive line coach? Or from a player acquisition standpoint, is that still maybe a little overrated?
No, I don't think that's overrated at all. I think he is the guru for a reason because he is the guru. I mean, I think anywhere you've been, whether you've dealt with him, you've always known his guys are prepared and ready to play. And then when you sit back and you kind of look at, the Cleveland Browns, it was Ethan Posick, it was Wyatt Teller, they traded for, it was, Joel Bitonio, a 2nd-round pick. Yeah, they have some 1st-round picks in there too, obviously. But I think I have a lot of confidence in Coach Callahan. And if he says, hey, look, I can make this guy work in round 2 or round 3 or whatever it's going to be, I certainly give that a lot of shake, and I give that a lot of confidence of like, hey, look, if that's true, then let's go. And and that's where I say you take the Brock Bowers and you get yourself a huge weapon that I think is perfectly suited for what Will Levis is, and I think works really good with the receiving core you already have.
Mark Dominic's our guest. How many elite players do you think are in this draft? I know you've talked a lot, and I've actually kind of adopted your philosophy on top 60 picks. And yet at the same time, I think there's a difference between the elites, the Neighbors, Harrisons, those, and maybe even that second tier of guys that we're talking about if the Titans trade end up 11, 12, 14, that would be around there. So how many elite guys do you kind of see in this draft? And if you were the GM, how important would be picking at 7, getting one of the elite guys?
But I think that's important. And I'm not including a quarterback. I'm talking about, offensive tackles. We've got 2, and Fashanu and obviously Coach Joe Alt. In wide receiver, I feel like there's 3. I think Rome Odunze is one of the elite talents in here. I think because he plays on the West Coast, people don't really know who he is. I think Neighbors and Harrison. I think Brock Bowers. I think those are your 6 elite players. And I think you're at a point with the Titans, with the new coach, obviously an important year for Rand and what he's doing. I think you do pick. I don't think you try to get cute here and pick up extra draft picks. You do something to help Will Levis get better, and that's offensive line or that's tight end. I don't think you I don't think you take the position at wide receiver based off the three guys in the starting lineup.
So do you think there's a sense of, hey, I'd rather have one elite player than two good players or three good players?
I personally do. I look at it this way, whether you knew this or not, Jared, but when I was in college at the University of Kansas, part of the way I put myself through college was I had a baseball and sports card shop, right? So
okay,
I always, and I use this analogy because of that. If anybody's a collector of cards or anything, you can get a Ken Griffey rookie junior, and it's really good. Or you can get 3 Ken Griffey rookies second and third year cards. What would you really rather have? The rookie. And so I kind of look at it the same way with an elite talent. I need a lot of good players, I do. But I can sometimes find good players in the 4th and 5th round. The elite players are hard to find, and that's why every draft there's only so many of them. And that's why I sit there and walk out of this going, I'll take the Griffey rookie, I'll take Bowers.
What an analogy. Former GM Mark Dominic with us. What do you think is the difference between the public perception of what's going down tonight and what you as a GM are hearing inside the league?
Well, I think probably the main thing is there's going to be a good amount of trades. I think that picks 7 through 11 are going to be on fire for a little bit there, just because there's going to be teams that want to go make a move because they're going to see the cutoff line somewhere where I see the cutoff line. And so with the quarterbacks going, is there going to be some aggressiveness to try to go get one of these top players? I think there will be. And then I think you're going to see the same thing around pick 18 through 22. That's going to be another hot trading spot because that kind of ends round ones, like guys you think have first round grades based off of each club. And so I think that's where if you're picking 26 or 28 and you're like, hey, look, I want to go get a guy that I still have as one of my top guys and first round talents, I'm going to go get it. So I would be looking at those at the 10th pick and the 20th pick and 2 picks on each of the sides saying, hey, pay attention there because I think you're going to see some action there in the trades.
You brought up Olu Fashanu as one of the elite prospects in this draft. How do you view the differences between him and Alt, and how do you view the differences between Alt and the other tackle prospects in this draft?
Yeah, so it's really tough. Alt is just so big and such a technician and with such good hands. It really it seems like a guy that's going to have a really good, jump right in, got the pedigree. The dad played. I was with him in Kansas City when I first came into the league, so it's amazing to see his son out here. I think he's a plug-and-play guy. You could put him at right tackle. You could put him at left tackle, and I think you're in good shape. The only thing I get worried about is leverage at the next level. Because he's so tall, sometimes those guys have a little bit harder time dropping their weight and being able to anchor, and that's going to be the one thing with Alt that you're going to have to get through. Fashanu is a better athlete. I think he has better potential and better attributes. I think Alt plays a little bit sharper game, but Fashanu to me is still an elite tackle who I think could be the better tackle of the two. Just because I think his athleticism, his bend, I think he's got still a lot of things right in front of him that are going to be really good and upside. And I don't think that is a potential. I think it's going to be a production thing. So I don't get so scared that he's going to be like, well, he's potentially going to bust because he doesn't have this. I think it's potential because I still think there's a lot of room for growth for him as he continues to mature into his body, where I think Joe Alt's already matured into his body. Both great players. I like Fashanu a little bit better, but Alt is probably the second safest pick in this entire draft class.
So if you were GM, how much would you rely on Bill Callahan when it comes to these two of saying, okay, if I'm at 7, they're both there, who do you want?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people lose is the amount of collaboration you're looking for, especially when you have a coach that's got the success and the history and the pedigree that Coach Callahan has. That if he says, hey, look, the scouts we like Alt better, but you like Olu, we're going to go Olu. I don't want to try to fit the square peg in the round hole. I want the coach to be motivated to have who he has. And so I would absolutely lean towards him and say, hey, look, coach, we might like this guy better, but if this is the guy you feel like, your success and your history, I'm definitely going to trust Callahan and I'll ride it. It's my pick as the GM. And that's what happened. I did that in Tampa. And you know what? You get credit for the good ones and you get credit for the bad ones. And so regardless of what all the other information is that's coming into making that choice, that's how it goes down. But I would certainly lean and be collaborative and let Coach help me pick this pick.
Former NFL GM Mark Dominic's with us on the program. So how hard is it to quote-unquote trade out? Let's use the Titans as an example. Rand said earlier this way, everybody's talking to everybody. But how difficult is it, saying that, hey, I want to make sure I get this player or this player, and they're both gone, and I'm at 7, and I want to trade out, and now we have to start making calls, and we've got 10 minutes. How difficult? It's easy to say, oh, well, just trade out. But how difficult is it to actually execute on a night like tonight?
Right. So I think what you have to have done, and what I did, is I've already called clubs, 2 days prior, 3 days prior, and said, hey, I'm not sure I'm going to stay at 7. I don't want to go too far back, but just know that that's a possibility. Do you guys have interest? And depending on if it's the GM I've done deals with before, or maybe it's Rand who I've never done a deal with before, right? It might be a little bit more just want to keep you in the loop of what's going on and let me know. If it's a guy that I've worked with before that I've known with Chris Greer, or maybe it's a John Schneider or something like that, it's like, hey, John, do you have interest? And he'll quickly say, hey, look, Mark, we're not looking to move up. Okay, good. I can take them off the list. Or, yeah, we'd have interest. What are you looking for? I should already have in my mind, Jared, what I'm already looking for. Because if I call them cold call and I don't know what I want, it's not going to help for the conversation. So I should already know, hey, look, it would take this, and this. Let me know your thoughts. And so you've got to preset that up. I did that back in one of my drafts where I set it up almost a week before. And then when I got on the clock at 5, I called the Jacksonville Jaguars. They still wanted to trade, and I moved back 2 spots. But I did the trade almost a week prior because you're pre-prepping that. You shouldn't be worried about doing that the night of the draft. It's like, oh, maybe we should try to trade back. Then you're not prepared.
How much do you value picks in the next year's draft? For instance, I keep thinking about Minnesota at 11, right? And I don't know if J.J. McCarthy goes in the top 6. And if J.J. doesn't go in the top 6 and he's there at 7, it's certainly a more palatable trade for Minnesota to get up than it would be for them to get up to 3 or 4, maybe for, again, J.J. or even one of these other teams. Minnesota, for instance, has 23 that they can deal with, but if J.J. McCarthy's their starting quarterback, there's a chance that next year's one might be number 2 in the draft. So how much do you value next year picks as compared to this year picks?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the old adage is it's half the value. So if I want a 2 next year, that's basically getting a 3 this year, right? That's usually the way that clubs look at it is, all right, I can give you a 3rd this year. I'll give you a 2 in next year's draft because it's a whole year away. And by the way, you might not be there picking that pick, and the coach might not be there coaching that team. And you got to keep that in your mind a little bit, but you also need to keep your eye towards the future as well on your football squad. And so for the Titans, wanting to learn a lot about Will Levis this year and seeing what he can do as the starter, but still having some ammunition possibly, I could understand that. I also would encourage, like if Rand was thinking that way and had that opportunity, that maybe you pull back to 11, but you pop back up to 8, 9, and you give up a little bit less, but maybe you pick up that really good pick next year, so you've got a little bit more arsenal. It's the same thing I've talked about with Monty Austinford, who's the GM, who was obviously a Titans executive last year or a year and a half ago. Same thing I'm talking with Monty about doing, or that he should do, is he's got to keep an eye on the 2025 class because he's got Kyler Murray, who I don't know if they're sure that he's the guy. He's the guy for 2024. But it's what Howie Roseman did with Jalen Hurts, right? He kept getting an extra 1 the following year to make sure he had some collateral in case he's got to go do something. I think that the teams that aren't sure about quarterback but aren't going to take one this year, I think they've got to really think about how do you pick up an extra pick next year's draft that's going to make an impact if I need to go make a move.
Wow. Mark, Dominic is with us. Are there any prospects in this draft that if they were on the board at 7, you're absolutely not trading unless somebody offered you something crazy in order to do it because you love that player that much?
Well, Marvin Harrison. I mean, if Marvin Harrison dropped to 7, there's just, and I know I don't even need wide receiver, not that to that level, but I do understand as great as DeAndre Hopkins is and has been, that's really going to be, a great player for him to be around. And yes, are we going to go 4 wides all year long? Yep, that's what we're going to do. We're going to just spread you out and sling the ball around with Will Levis. But he's the one, you know how I feel about Brock Bowers. I love the player. I think he's just an elite tight end. I think he's a difference maker. And so I would put those 2 guys as the 2 guys I'm like, hey, look, I'm going to stick with where I am, and I'm going to take 2 guys that I think are going to make a big difference, even though I see that Harrison seems very much like a luxury. He's too good of a talent.
So if the owner were to say to you, Mark, we've got to get better on the offensive line, which I think I would tell you that, you know that,
sure.
We all know that. If the owner were to say, Mark, we got to get better on the offensive line, are you sure about this tight end? What would your answer be?
I am sure. I'm very confident, and I also know that, even though we've got this pick here, we've got pick 38, that I feel very confident we can still move around with or do something with in terms of the offensive line, because I do feel like this is a longer class where we might get Tyler Guyton in the 2nd round or Jordan Morgan in the 2nd round. We might get a guy that I think has a chance to be a starting offensive lineman for us, and I would rather do that. And I think I'm walking out with 2 guys, especially if Coach Callahan's on board with some of these, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th offensive tackle or offensive lineman. If Coach Callahan likes those guys, then I feel even better about it. But I would, you got to hold up. You got to stand your ground and stand for something, and that's what I would stand for.
Do you think that as far as like the way the NFL practices nowadays, I asked Vrabel about this last year, and I think he got a little pissy about it, but I asked him about the idea of like offensive linemen just don't practice the way they used to practice. I mean, there's no two-a-days. They've limited the amount of padded practices, and there's one less preseason game. And if you draft a guy in the first or second round and you want him to start, you're only going to play the starting offensive line for 11 snaps of one preseason game. And so I worry about this idea of not taking a guy like Alt, taking a guy like Jordan Morgan, who has a limited amount of starts, all on the left side at Arizona, but that Bill Callahan, just won't have the time or the resources to be able to get that guy ready by week one. Does that enter your head at all?
No, there's so much mental that goes on with the offensive line too. There's so many walkthroughs. There's so many other areas where you could still get, you can't recreate the speed and the timing, and there might be some headaches that you have to deal with, in game 1 to game 2 that you're still trying to work through. But and I agree. You would like to see them bang a little bit more, but that's by the CBA rules, and so you just play by the rules that are given to you, and realize that all 31 other clubs are dealing with the exact same thing, and so. That's where it comes back to, Jared, when you talk about like drafting offensive linemen, understanding the character of the guy, but also the intelligence of the guy. Where is he from a head standpoint? So how fast can he translate stuff from the chalkboard to the field without having to do a walkthrough? Those are one of the things your area scouts should be really kind of getting a good sense of, because you're going to want a guy that you're going to want a player that's not going to have to need to walk through it to get it. They're going to be able to mentally see it on the board and be able to mentally walk through it and know, okay, I get it now, or I understand it without having to actually physically go through it. That's an important part of, I bet you, what Coach Callahan looks for in his talent of players too.
As a GM, could Bill Callahan or Brian Callahan talk you out of the Brock Bowers pick? Let's say Bowers and Alt are on the board at 7. Could Bill Callahan, and I know all this stuff's probably already been done before tonight,
right.
But could Bill Callahan or Brian Callahan talk you out of taking the guy you really want? If Bill Callahan says, Mark, I can make this guy into a 10-time Pro Bowler. I can make this guy into Orlando Pace. Would that be enough to sway you to say, okay, my gut tells me Bowers, but he's the guru and he is dead set on this guy?
Yeah, so young Mark, me, ran Carthon age Mark, when it was 37, 38, I would have absolutely just said, you know what, I'm going to take the tackle and make the coaches happy. And 53-year-old me would say, I'm taking Brock Bowers and we're going to figure it out. That's just the difference, because I'm going to trust my scouts, trust my gut instinct. And if I'm wrong, I'll go down swinging the way I think. And I know the coaches have their opinion too, and I respect it. But if again, young me, first year, second year general manager, you're going to get swayed. You just will, because you're trying to be collaborative in the right way. Fifth year general manager, seventh year general manager kind of a person, I think you're going to be like, hey, look, this is the guy we're going with, and that's the direction we're going to go. And we'll circle back around on this offensive line. Don't worry, we're not done yet.
Fascinating. Last one for you, Mark Dominic with us. He'll be on SiriusXM's coverage. What do you do if one of the top 3 quarterbacks is available at 7? Daniels, May, Williams. Do you take them and, to the point of what you just said, figure it out with Levis and everything else afterwards? Or do you look at the owner and say, well, we're committed to Will, so let's pass on these guys, even if you think they may end up as better pros or are better prospects in your mind than Levis?
Yeah, that's why you have to go through the process. You should have already had it delineated, and you should have Will Levis in the conversation. Like, how does Will Levis rank against Drake May? Like, what do you think? Who would you rather have, knowing what we know now, but also what we see out of Drake May? Where do we rank Will Levis in this draft class? And it's the position. And suddenly now the AFC South is, it was Stroud, and we'll see what Anthony Richardson is, and Trevor Lawrence. It's a bunch of young dudes. Like, this is going to be a battle for a decade, right? For who's going to be the best. It's kind of what I dealt with in Tampa when it was Drew Brees and Matt Ryan and Cam Newton. That's not a fun place to be. It's hard. And so I think you see the same thing here. So my gut instinct is that's where I probably trade back. But if I have Drake May or if I have Jaden Daniels ranked ahead of it, you know what? Life isn't fair. Things aren't fair. Every other player is having to go through a locker room change because they're drafting an offensive tackle or they're drafting a tight end, and it's changing their spot on the depth chart. Same for quarterback. I want the best quarterback. And if Will Levis ends up beating out my guy that I just drafted in the first round, that means we're probably in really good shape. And if Will Levis doesn't beat him out, that means we're certainly in better shape, right? And so either way, I feel like I'm going to win out of that, because unless they're both bad players, well, then we're kind of, we're messed up either way. So I would rather trade, but if not, then you're supposed to take the quarterback, because you know the difference that makes on Sunday in terms of tilting the field your way or not. And again, if they're both good, then what do I do? Next year at this time, I'm trading one of those guys and probably recouping my first-round pick.
Mm-hmm. Mark Dominic, former NFL GM. He is now with SiriusXM NFL Radio. He will be part of SiriusXM's draft coverage. I believe you're on the college channel. Is that correct, Mark?
College channel 84 at nights, covering rounds 1, 2, and 3.
That is absolutely fantastic stuff. Mark, thanks so much, bud.
You bet, Ben. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. I actually thought the most we'll react to a lot of that. But I'll tell you the most fascinating part I thought, as far as Dominic's concerned, the fact that, hey, young Mark Dominic, he would have listened to Bill Callahan. Older Mark Dominic, no, we're drafting the guy I want. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company. We continue live from Twin Peaks in Madison. It is draft day. 1025, 106 through the game. All right, let's talk about the Tennessee Men's Clinic. That's right. You've put this off for way too long, and it's time to get it done and move forward with your sex life. And the Tennessee Men's Clinic is the leader in bedroom confidence. The reality is pills often quit working, and guys start making excuses for why they're not coming to bed. Did you know? I didn't know this, that studies show that men will be more irritable and argumentative before bed just to avoid failing at intimacy. And yes, I know, men hate going to the doctor, but the Tennessee Men's Clinic was created in 2014 to take care of guys just like you. For a decade, the urologists and providers at the Tennessee Men's Clinic have helped guys with ED and weight loss, and they now even offer aesthetic enhancements and cosmetic procedures. Their ED and weight loss treatments truly change lives with no surgery, and they are seeing success rates as high as 90%. They even offer same-day or next-day appointments. So call them today for an appointment. That's 615-208-9090. That's 615-208-9090. Or go online to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com to book an appointment today. That's TennesseeMen'sClinic.com. Stillman and Company live out at Twin Peaks out here in Madison, where, again, it is draft night, 6 o'clock right here. Chris Sanders, Derek Mason, Trevor Maddich will be breaking down the draft. We'll react to the Titans at 7. We went long with Mark Dominic there, but I think it was probably a good idea because a lot of you guys have texted in. Somebody texted in and said, what a fantastic interview, great questions, and I got a huge insight into being in the draft room tonight. Somebody else said, Dominic is a stud. Could he have any agenda to lie or smokescreen in the interview he did? I don't think so. You know, as I said when, we played the cut a couple, last week, where he said he would take Brock Bowers. I mean, I have a ton of respect for Dominic. I think people around the NFL have a ton of respect for Mark Dominic. So I don't think there's anything to lie about. Another texter said, how can Jared do such good interviews and then whine so much the rest of the time? To which I had to text back in and I said, LOL, but thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that. So we did go along with him. Coming up next, Rich Gannon lays out exactly what the Titans need to do. And the good news is he thinks they'll be able to do it. We'll get to that coming up next here. Stillman and Company live out at Twin Peaks out in Madison. Again, the draft show's at 6. And I think this place can fit. Can this place fit 150? I think maybe even more than that. I don't know. I'm not the fire marshal. But let's pack it tonight at 6 o'clock for the draft. Of course, we'll be here until whenever the draft ends. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. how much have you heard of the Joe Alt and the Titans marriage being prearranged before the draft comes up tomorrow night?
Yeah, I try to stay away from a lot of the social media stuff in the mock draft, which is who I am, because I know the most important thing is how I train, who I am as a person, and how I want to get ready for, whoever I get chosen to, whatever city I'm going to. But my mom is big on the social media, so she's big on letting me know, where the mock drafts are heading. I've heard the Titans in Tennessee a lot, and obviously I'd be very excited to end up there.
Okay, there you go. That was Joe Alt on our show yesterday saying, hey, I'd love to be a Tennessee Titan. TD was on last hour. TD said he thinks, his gut is it's going to be Alt. I want Alt. LD from McMinnville texted in yesterday, and he said, he goes, you are setting the listeners and the fans up for disappointment tomorrow night, talking about tonight, when the Titans don't draft Joe Alt. And I'm like, God, I just want a genie to tell me that in 3 hours Joe Alt will be a Tennessee Titan. I'll be happy. Now, look, if the other guys, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers, Marvin Harrison, if those guys are Titans, I'll be happy too. But that's the one. So Rich Gannon was on SiriusXM NFL Radio, and he was asked, what do you think the Titans end up doing here at 7? And think about all the options that and he says it is very cut and dry of what should happen and what is likely to happen.
I mean, you're trying to bring along this young quarterback, and you want to make sure that there are pieces around him. And I think that the focus for the Titans is going to be to continue to improve the pieces around the young quarterback, but make sure that the guy's able to take the extra hitch in the pocket. I think that left tackle position is a critical position of need. I think you're looking at a player. The best tackle in the draft is Joe Alt, and I think he's the guy that's going to come in there. And I'd be surprised if the Titans don't take Alt. I think when you look at how it's lining up, the Bears taking a quarterback, Washington taking a quarterback, the Patriots taking a quarterback, the fourth pick in the draft with the Cardinals. Maybe they move out, maybe they don't. You would think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go. Neighbors could go pretty early. And then, you look at the first tackle off the board, and I think it's going to be the Tennessee Titans. I mean, when I look at how things are working out, that experiment with Andre Dillard did not work out last season. So I think you look at a guy like Joe Alt, who can be your franchise left tackle for the next decade.
He's saying it's got to be Alt, and that it's going to align to Alt, and that, we asked Rich at the Super Bowl about, hey, if you had the choice between Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell for the Titans, that elite touchdown scorer versus the elite non-touchdown scorer, who would you take? And I was expecting Rich to say, oh, you got to take the touchdown scorer, because quarterbacks love scoring touchdowns. He's like, no. The guy I would take is the protector. That's who you need. Warren Moon came on at the Super Bowl. He said the same thing. And so when Rich Gannon is just like, they need Joe Alt. They need him, and he's going to be there, and they're going to take him, and they're going to – I wonder in my head one of two things. Number one, is Rich just connecting the tea leaves? Because I do think there's a good chance he gets to you, right? Quarterback, Marvin. Chargers at 5, who the hell knows? And then the Giants have 3 tackles, though they did bring him in for a top 30 visit. I don't think they'll take Alt, which would then leave you at 7. But, Ian, who was Rich Gannon's coach when he made it to the Super Bowl with the Oakland Raiders?
Gruden.
He was not the coach. Gruden was the coach the year before. This was his offensive coordinator then. It was Bill Callahan.
Okay.
And Rich Gannon told us at the Super Bowl, and I don't know if this was on the air or off the air, that Rich has known Brian Callahan since he was 11 years old, hanging out in the quarterback room in the facility in Oakland when he was the star quarterback. And I know how much respect Rich Gannon has for Bill Callahan. Even though that they were together and they kind of got fired together, like that run ended and Callahan got fired and Jamarcus Russell got drafted, and like that all kind of happened all at one time. And I wonder if there's some insight there into Rich saying like, no, they're going to take Alt. That's who they're going to get, and on they go. And I got to tell you, I said this at the start of the show. between Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, and Odunze. I'm like, please just don't mess this up. Just please do not mess this up. But if the stars align and Alt's there and this just almost seems too good to be true sometimes. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025. But coming up next, there are a couple of nuggets that are out there. Some that I believe, some that I don't believe. One that I think absolutely has Titans written on it as a possibility, but I wouldn't do it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
I will say this about the Chargers, though. He has brought up offensive line. It has affected other teams to the point where in like the last 5 days, J.C. Latham, the Alabama right tackle, became a very prominent. There's a very prominent belief that like the Chargers are very locked onto Latham. Some people believe the Titans really like Latham. Like if let's say Alt came off at 5, some people think the Titans would be more than happy to run the card in on Latham at 7. I trotted it out yesterday. I think it was early in the early afternoon. I said I put Latham at 5. I got killed by Chargers fans. They absolutely murdered me. And then Daniel Jeremiah comes out with his mock late last night. And oh, surprise, Latham now is at 5. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not the only one hearing this. Clearly,
he's copying you.
I'm sure DJ's copying me. But yeah, I sit there and I look at it and I'm like, they clear like if they do this, and that's when I spotted them there. I'm like, if they do this, like, where are they getting their wide? They need wide receiver talent, and you'd be passing an elite at 5 to do this. Maybe even Marvin Harrison Jr., depending on how it all comes in.
There you go. That was Charles Robinson today on Robbie and Retro talking about the Chargers and the gossip, the scuttlebutt, that the Chargers are interested in going with J.C. Latham at 5. Now, the first place that this, that at least I saw it, was the Daniel Jeremiah mock draft that had him going at 5. And I heard Caroline talk about this today, that she talked to somebody inside the league that she knows who said that a lot of people think that, I guess, Joe Ortiz and Daniel Jeremiah worked together in Baltimore as scouts, and that everybody thinks that they're good friends and that this is probably coming from Joe Ortiz. Mel Kiper Jr. wrote at ESPN that the Chargers will take an offensive tackle at 5 if they don't trade down, saying that Joe Alt and J.C. Latham will likely both be on the board when L.A. is on the clock. Will Harbaugh really pass on one of them when he knows what he wants to build in the trenches? It might take a huge haul of picks to do so, and then he said more on that in a minute. So Mel is hearing that, hey, this is going to be a tackle. I don't buy it. And I don't buy it's going to be Latham. Unless Joe Ortiz knows they're going to take Latham if they don't trade out, and thus they want their fans to, at least not be shocked when the card comes down at 5. Another nugget from Mel Kiper. He says the Titans will take a tackle or a wide receiver at 7. Well, duh. He says Tennessee's needed offensive tackle is too great. It can't afford to trade down, right? But what if Roma Dunze is available? My second-ranked receiver would be awfully appealing, says Mel. So here's the thing. I think it's either going to be tackle, wide receiver, or Bowers. No duh. Now, there's a little nugget that's come out within the last hour, which is Diana Rossini reporting that San Francisco is trying to trade into the top 10. And according to Diana, they've had conversations with teams, including one picking in the top 10, about trading either Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel in an effort to move up in the first round. Mike Silver put out that they're receiving calls on Deebo Samuel. Now, my theory is when you see an insider or a reporter say they are taking calls, like, oh, yeah, they're taking calls on Johnny Joe, what that really means is we want you to call us about Johnny Joe. We're open for business. That's what that means. It's like the old sign, I need tickets, really means I have tickets. I think it's kind of like that. So if they're talking to teams in the top 10, how many teams in the top 10 have a former 49er GM, right? Washington is not trading for Deebo Samuel and giving up the second pick. That's not happening. So the connection, if, they're going to call somebody, they could call anybody. It could be Chicago. But there is a natural connection between Rand and San Francisco. Let me just say this. I am not interested in anything with San Francisco for Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk that would include trading 7 for 31. Not in this draft. That is too big of a move to go from 7 to 31. I mean, I don't even know what the value on that is. So according to the chart, it's $1,500 for 7, and it's $600 for 31. You're talking about a difference of 900 points. You're telling me that's the 18th pick of the draft. Is Deebo Samuel worth 18? You could argue Brandon Ayuk is worth 18, and I do like Brandon Ayuk. I would trade for Ayuk before I would trade for Samuel because of the physicality with which Samuel plays with. I just don't think that's going to last very long. Ayuk is more of a true route-running wide receiver. I think Ayuk is a younger but not as good in his prime version of DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not trading Joe Alt for that. I mean, it'd have to be more. And it's not going to be, San Francisco's got 31, 63, and then they always have comp picks because they always have coaches and GMs get hired and they always get thirds in return for that or whatever. I wouldn't do it. Ayuk, 31 and 63, and I still wouldn't do it, and I don't think San Francisco will do more. That doesn't mean that the Titans won't do it. I'm just saying I wouldn't do it when I could take Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, Joe Alt, Roma Dunze, that kind of player. Young, healthy, potentially elite. And when it comes to Ayuk, who, again, I really, really like, when it comes to Ayuk, I don't know if he's an elite player. And so these guys that you're picking, these are what I would say are elite prospects because nobody's an elite player until they become that. But the elite prospect gives you the opportunity to have an elite player. And I don't think, personally, that Ayuk is elite. Neil says, as a Chargers fan, I did not know one single Charger fan listen to this program.
Me either.
That is a shocker. Neil says, as a Chargers fan, I would be devastated if the Chargers draft J.C. Latham. They need a wide receiver real bad. I mean, I keep telling you the Duck theory when they traded Keenan Allen tells me they're going wide receiver. But the scuttlebutt is that it's, Latham, and I could see it as a toe dip just to see how the fans would react. One texter says, would you trade the 7th pick for Deebo Samuel? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. One texter says, if you traded with Minnesota to move back and got 2 firsts, would you trade the latter first for Brandon Ayuk? So would you trade 23 for Ayuk? Yes. Then I need to have either Alt or Fashanu at 11. And I don't think Alt's getting to 11. I heard Derek today say that he doesn't think the Jets will take him. I absolutely think the Jets will take Joe Alt. Like, to me, 10 is the line of demarcation, and I think you're flirting with a problem if you try to trade back to 9 because somebody can get to 8, especially when it looks like Atlanta's going to go defense. So if you go to 11, you're probably losing on Alt. Just keep that in mind. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So I've got something Mark Dominic said an hour ago has really stuck with me. Every time I talk about Rand, everybody thinks it's a criticism. And this is not a criticism of Rand Carthon. In fact, in my opinion, this would be my way of empowering Rand Carthon. And I want to get to that next. Stillman and Company, again, we are live at Twin Peaks right here. We're at 6 o'clock. We are 1 hour away, basically, from the draft show tonight. Trevor, Chris, Derek, all right here. We hope to see you tonight out here again at Twin Peaks. And let's go ahead and give something away. We've been holding on these all day. 615-737-1025. Be caller number 5 at 615-737-1025. And you will win a pair of tickets to see Neil Young and Crazy Horse at First Bank Amphitheater on Wednesday, May 8th. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, Air Conditioning Game National Studios, Twin Peaks in Madison tonight, less than 1 hour away from the draft show. And we all know that we have great analysis on the draft show with Derek, Chris, Trevor. But we also know that you guys love how I go crazy when the Titans do something ridiculous, like they did last year when they took a guard with the 11th pick. We shall see what goes down in an hour and probably 2 hours and 30 minutes, 2 hours, 25 minutes. We'll see. But there is one thing I want to address as we've talked all about the players and the prospects, and we'll get back into it and scenarios and things like that. But there is something that I do want to address when it comes to Ran Carthon and tonight's pick specifically. And every time I bring up Ran Carthon, everybody thinks it's an anti-Ran Carthon take. Everybody thinks it. I could say Ran Carthon cured cancer today, and I'd get people that text me, you hate Ran Carthon, you this, you that, you all. And what I'm about to say, I think, is more of empowering Ran Carthon. What I am afraid of tonight is I am afraid of Ran Carthon being persuaded by everybody else. By Chad Brinker, the president of football operations, who I guess is technically his boss. By Brian Callahan, the head coach that they hired, who, he says we're going to hunt together. By Bill Callahan, the guru. The rest of the coaching staff, everybody else, the scouts, which, by the way, are John Robinson scouts. Whether it's Anthony Robinson, Brian Gardner, Kevin Turks, whoever. And I'm afraid that while Ran is so insistent upon collaborating and working together and making sure that he gets players that these guys want to coach and everything else, I am worried that he's going to lose sight of, at the end of the day, this needs to be his pick. He was asked by Corey Curtis on Tuesday about, hey, is this the Ran Carthon pick? Here's what he said.
Is it a Ran decision or is it a consensus decision?
No, it's a us decision. Everything we do is us, and that's why we spend the time that we spend together and understanding where we are. A-Rob and I were kind of going back and forth this weekend on a couple guys, and, I texted him. I was like, hey, man, I think we're low on this guy, and in my opinion of watching. And so if A-Rob, he's going to come back with the facts. And he's like, hey, scouts see him here, the coaches see him here. And I was the high guy. So I was like, all right, maybe I'm wrong, And so it's a us thing. Last time I checked, I'm not devising a scheme. I'm not calling any plays. But it's my understanding of what he wants, what Denard wants, what Colt wants, on all three phases. And it's our job to go out and find that for him.
I have no problem with Ran Carthon saying it. But I hope that's not actually true. I hope that at the end of the day, when this 7th pick is made, or this trade is made to move out of 7 to pick somebody else, that this is what Ran Carthon wants to do inside Ran Carthon's gut. Mark Dominic, former NFL general manager, was on our show an hour ago, and I asked him, I said, hey, you got Brian Callahan as your coach. Bill Callahan, he's the guru. He's been doing this forever. If they say up and down, Joe Alt, because, again, Mark Dominic wants Brock Bowers. He would take Brock Bowers at 7. If these guys are just begging you, take Joe Alt. We can make him a Hall of Famer. Would you listen to him?
Young Mark, me, Ran Carthon age Mark, when it was 37, 38, I would have absolutely just said, you know what, I'm going to take the tackle and make the coaches happy. And 53-year-old me would say, I'm taking Brock Bowers and we're going to figure it out. That's just the difference, because I'm going to trust my scouts, trust my gut instinct. And if I'm wrong, I'll go down swinging the way I think. And I know the coaches have their opinion too, and I respect it. But if again, young me, first year, second year general manager, you're going to get swayed. You just will, because you're trying to be collaborative in the right way. 5th year general manager, 7th year general manager kind of a person, I think you're going to be like, hey, look, this is the guy we're going with, and that's the direction we're going to go, and we'll circle back around on this offensive line. Don't worry, we're not done yet.
Okay, so I'm not, if Ran, naturally is like, well, but, Brian Callahan wants this guy, Bill Callahan wants this guy, and this guy, it's natural. It's not only natural to say, hey, we're going to do, what the group wants to do. It's also kind of the edict from the owner, right? Because the sentiment, and I have no idea if this is true or not, but this is the sentiment, is that John Robinson shut the office door and that when they had conversations, everybody would raise their hand and say, well, I think, and John didn't listen. Now, I had somebody that, was on John Robinson's staff that told me that was like, I thought I was getting fired the night Caleb Farley was drafted because I guess they were so against the idea of drafting Caleb Farley. And so this is not a criticism of Rand, especially because Rand hasn't even done this yet. This is just almost like a word of advice, which is as fakakta of a front office structure as it feels like the Titans want to run, at the end of the day, if this doesn't work, he's the guy who's going to get blamed. And I heard the midday show yesterday talking about, well, they said Rand's in charge, so if they say Rand's in charge and it doesn't work, I'm going to blame Rand. And I really don't think that that's fair because I think it's really like a committee, which I hate that. But regardless, like if what happened last year with Skoronski and then he ends up playing guard and then he ends up not being that good and maybe he develops into a good player, I don't know. But if all of those things happen again this year, Rand's going to get fired. And it's not like I'm rooting for it to happen. I love the Titans. I want them to pick a great player, and I want them to win the Super Bowl because of the great players that they pick. But I hear you guys often talk about let Rand cook. I almost think that the phrase is so ridiculous that it almost makes my skin crawl for me to say it myself. But I will say this. When it comes to Rand Carthon making this choice, if you guys are let Rand cook, let Rand cook, let Rand cook, then at the end of the day, doesn't Rand need to make the decision that Rand feels is in the best interest of the football team? Again, all this, we're going to work together and we're going to pull the rope in the same direction and all of that sounds good. But did they have a committee that ran the Allied forces, or was it Dwight Eisenhower? Did they have a committee that dictated the war plans of the Revolutionary War, or was it George Washington? At the end of the day, this is your shot. This is your team. And I know Rand made the comment that drove me insane the other day about this feeling like his first draft. Because I think last year if somebody had said, oh yeah, you don't do anything around here, people would have gone nuts. Probably because I may have said that and people did go nuts. So it's not your first draft. But if you're going to take that approach, then go with your feelings. Screw everybody else's. And I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to what Bill Callahan has to say. Because if I was GM, I'd listen to what Bill Callahan has to say. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to get fired on this talk show for doing something, whether it's saying something I shouldn't say or picking topics that nobody listens to or anything like that, we're going to do what I want to do. And if it doesn't work, then it's going to be the end of the Jared Stillman program. And if I was GM, I'd take the same approach. I think Mark Dominic's telling you, it's impossible not to want to collaborate, to not want to, lean on everybody for their expertise. But at the end of the day, it's only two people's job to win. It's the head coach and the GM. The offensive coordinator will get another job. The assistant GM will get another job. What's John Robinson doing today? What's Mike Vrabel doing today? It's the job of the coach and the GM to win. So, again, a word of advice for Rand, do what you want to do. Forget about Chad Brinker, even if he's your boss, forget about it. If you're the one who's empowered to make the pick, make the pick. And then, unlike last year, when you made the picks and then, we don't know where Peter's going to play and we don't want to talk about Tajay Spears' knee and we don't really want to tell you why we picked Levitt, own it. Own it tonight after you make it. Even if it's a controversial pick like taking J.C. Latham, which would lead me to go insane on the draft show. Own it. And I think that's his best chance for success. I'm worried, though, this is going to be a big groupthink project for for the Titans. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in here on the program. Coming up next, I don't want to say I can't see how the Titans could screw this up because anything's possible. But the way the board is shaping up, the Titans are absolutely going to have opportunities to pick elite-level prospects. Will they? We'll do that next. Stillman and Company again live out at Twin Peaks, 102.5, 106 for the game.
When you look at your pick at 7, have teams been nosy, as you would call it, or are you guys open for business?
No, it's still people are nosy, and I think we owe it, to our organization. I owe it to Coach Callahan and his staff to, listen to all calls, no matter where they fall, just to see if there's anything enticing, if it's anything that's going to, blow us away to make us really want to, trade back. But we're just listening at this point.
Where are you, as far as prospects are concerned? Like, do you have ones that, hey, I don't care what the offer is, like this is a guy we would take?
Short answer, yes.
That was Rand earlier this week saying, hey, are there guys that if they're available, like you would not trade out of? And it's like, I mean, look, if you wanted to give me, if Cincinnati called and wanted to offer Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase for Marvin Harrison Jr., I'd do it. But, like, no, I'm not trading the pick for Marvin Harrison Jr. So the question is, how's the QB draft going to go? That's the first question I have. I think it's going to be 1, 2, 3. I've seen all the scuttlebutt about maybe the Giants at 6 trying to get up at 3. I think it's possible that New England really, really likes J.J. McCarthy. And the reason I think this is because, again, McCarthy, what do they say about him? He's a winner. He's tough. He's got all the intangibles. He's a leader. And I think you couple that with that Michigan helmet, and I can see Robert Kraft thinking, well, I said Tommy couldn't throw the ball the best either, and look at how he turned out. And saying, okay, well, I can trade back to 6, and I can take this guy. I can take him. I can take McCarthy, and I get a little something. And then the Giants say, okay, we can get Drake May. So I think there may be a little something to that, but I have no idea. If 3 quarterbacks go in the top 6, that means the Titans will have their choice of 2 of the following 4 players. Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, or Brock Bowers. I said 4 or 5. 2 of the 5 players. I will be happy with any of those 5 players. Alt, Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, Bowers. If they walk out of here with Brock Bowers tonight and they don't take Joe Alt, and I want Joe Alt, if they do that, I'll be okay. If 4 quarterbacks go tonight inside of the top 6, and there is some scuttlebutt that'll happen, but I'm skeptical because we heard a lot of J.J. McCarthy talk this week. If 4 quarterbacks go, then you're going to have your choice of 3 of those 5 between Alt, Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, and Bowers. Now, as far as what's in the best interest of Will Levis, because a lot of people will ask that question. Now, when we get on the draft show, I'll ask the guys. One guy played offensive line in the NFL, the other 2 played receiver. But my gut tells me that all of these guys provide something for Will Levis one way or another. So we hear, oh, no, the tight end, that is the quarterback's best friend. True. But so is a game-breaking receiver. And now Joe Burrow didn't really have much of a tight end in Cincinnati, but he had the receivers, especially the big one in Chase. I'd say that helped him out pretty well. You cannot tell me that having a left tackle better than Jalen Duncan is not going to be a good thing for the quarterback. So again, I'm rooting for 4 quarterbacks tonight. I think it's going to be 3 in the top 6. I'm rooting for 4. But I almost look at this and I think to myself, there's no way the Titans can screw this up. Because at least 2 of Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, or Odunze is going to be there. And then there's the one name that we keep hearing. Just a little tick, 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 tick. Now, a lot of people are talking about the Chargers at 5 with J.C. Latham. That's the name we hear at 7 just every now and then. Ian, I wouldn't say we hear J.C. Latham a lot.
No, not a lot.
But we hear it.
Yes, we do.
I do not want J.C. Latham with the 7th pick.
Too rich, huh?
I don't think he can move to left tackle.
You don't think so?
I'm worried he's ultimately going to be a guard.
Not worried
and
about.
You cannot take a guard with the 7th pick.
You don't think Big Coach can work his magic?
Maybe. But as much as I would love to say, okay, well, Jedrick Wills was a right tackle at Alabama, and the Browns took him 10th overall in 2020, and they flipped him to the left side, and so he was a left tackle out of Alabama. Why can't J.C. Latham do the same thing? Mm-hmm. Number one, their body types are very different. Number two, their quarterback was Tua. Now, what's specific about Tua that would allow a right tackle to flip over to the left side?
Well, he's used to the blind side.
He's left-handed. Because he's left-handed, the blind side would be the right tackle. So you can take the right tackle for a left-handed passer, in this case Tua, and flip him over. I don't know that you can do that with Latham. And so if you trade down to 11, like let's say Minnesota really does, let's say 3 quarterbacks go, Minnesota wants to make the move, they trade. Okay, if you do that, and I'm fine with that, then you can take a Latham or a Fashanu or one of those guys if one of the other guys that I think are the more elite level prospects are not there. But as much as I've gotten on the Titans over the years, and you know it, you know I've gotten on the Titans over the years. I'm almost like, how can you screw this up? With Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, Odunze. 2 of those 3 are going to be there. How can you screw this up? But then again, I grew up a Titans fan. I still am a Titans fan. And I know if there's any team in the NFL that can screw something up, Ian, who is it?
Oh, it's the Titans.
It's the Titans.
It's the Browns and the Jets too, but it's the Titans.
And Washington and the Raiders and Jacksonville, and yes. But it's absolutely the Titans. So just please don't screw this up. 615-737-1025. We got some what-if scenarios. So what if tonight this happens? What if tonight that happens? Then what do you want them to do? And I will tell you we will do that next. Stillman and Company and your phones, of course. 1025, 106 The Game.
Here's the number one do. Make all the decisions before draft day. Now, technically, that's going to be impossible, but you want to go through and decide, have all of your mock drafts drawn up, have your top 150 all aligned the way you want. So if there's a dispute as to who's a better player between John Jones and Bill Smith, you can look up there on your board and see how you've rated them, and you stick with that. But anything about possible trades, about possible cuts, about anything along those lines, you want those decisions made prior to draft day so that when you go in there, all you're going to worry about are the new things that are going to pop up, and there will be a bunch of those.
Okay, that was the old man. May he rest in peace on what I would say is his day. Now, I want to play some of these what-if scenarios here because, as I said, got to make every decision before you get to the draft. Here's scenario one. What if the three quarterbacks go, Williams, May, and Daniels in whatever order, Harrison, Alt, and Neighbors? Then what? This is what I would do. At this point, Alt and Neighbors and Harrison are off the board, and I'm not interested in J.J. McCarthy. Now, you could trade J.J. McCarthy, but it'd have to be a trade that you want, and I would pick Brock Bowers. Now, this leads to another discussion of Bowers versus Odunze. Who do you take? And because Odunze is an outside receiver and Ridley and Hopkins are outside receivers, that is not a need pick here, but it is a tie goes to the runner, and I'll take Bowers. By the way, I texted Mark Dominic. You know, we had him on earlier today. You know how much he loves Bowers. I texted Dominic, and I said, hey, if it's just straight up Bowers or Odunze, who are you taking? And Ian, you want to know what he said back?
What'd he say?
He said, you're asking me that question?
Oh.
I was like, I got it. I was like, I got it. Bowers. Okay. What if three quarterbacks go, Harrison, Alt, and Neighbors go, and you want to make a trade? What would be the bare minimum to accept in a trade? The answer for me would be at least a pre-teens or 13 pick, a top 45 pick, and a second rounder next year. So that's the Raiders at 13, that's Denver at 12, that's Minnesota. All my guys are gone, right? Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, and yes, I love Bowers. So I'm trading away from Bowers. I'm trading away from Odunze. I'm probably trading into Fashanu, which I can live with another top 45 pick. In the case of Minnesota, it would be 11 and 23. In the case of Denver, it would be 12, and then you got to give me next year's 1 because that would equal a second rounder this year and next year's 2. That's probably too rich for them. Vegas, 13, 44, and your 2 next year. New Orleans would be 14, 45, and your 2 next year. And again, that's if Alt, Neighbors, and Harrison are off the board. What if 4 quarterbacks go, Harrison and Alt? To me, slam dunk, Malik Neighbors. Turn the card in, we don't need to talk. Well, what if they offer you Neighbors? 4 quarterbacks go, Neighbors goes, Odunze goes, which means Joe Alt and Marvin Harrison Jr. are both on the clock at 7. Ian, what would you do here?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I'd have to
Harrison v. Alt?
Harrison v. Alt? I think I'd still have to go Harrison.
So what I'd do first is I'd pick up the phone, I call Atlanta.
Somebody would want Harrison at 7, right?
They would. The problem is you might also be trading away Alt.
Yeah.
But I pick up the phone, I call Atlanta, I call Chicago. And I say best offer gets Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd want next year's 1 from each team. They'd probably say no. Then if it's Chicago, I want Carolina's 2 next year. And maybe a 5th round pick or something. If it's Atlanta, I want your 2 next year, and I'll move back to 1 spot. You make the decision for me. The reality is, if I couldn't move out, I'd take Joe Alt over Marvin Harrison Jr. I just think there's too much. Again, this is where we're splitting hairs here between these elite prospects. I think there's just too much bull crap surrounding Marvin Harrison about, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. Schefter put it out today. He hasn't even signed his NFLPA licensing agreement. He can't even be in a football video game. You know who does things that keep you out of the video games? A-holes, right? Barry Bonds. He was out of the video games because he's too good for that.
No one likes Barry Bonds.
Mike Vrabel, remember, he didn't get in a video game. People went crazy about that. So every other freaking coach finds their way in there. Now, I think Vrabel found his way into the video game the next year. But again, my point is only that happens to Vrabel. I guarantee you Brian Callahan's in the football video game next year. Because, that's got to be more difficult. Belichick, he was never in the football video game because he's too good for it. It's like, okay. And that's, again, it's just we're splitting hairs here, but I feel safer with all. Okay. What if the Titans decide J.C. Latham goes 5th, 4 quarterbacks, and Joe Alt? And now it's Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, Bowers. Ian? Your pick between Harrison and Neighbors.
If I had to pick just between those two, Harrison or Neighbors?
Or Odunze or Bowers.
Man, that is tough. I mean, I don't know. I'm calling around. I'm trying to get some picks out of that. If all those guys.
Make the choice for me.
Yeah, if all those guys are there, I mean, it seems unlikely that someone wouldn't want to do something to move up.
I think that they would take Marvin Harrison Jr., not even think twice. I'd take Malik Neighbors. I have Neighbors over Harrison. I have had Neighbors over Harrison from the very beginning, and I have Neighbors over Harrison now. But again, regardless of what scenario happens, in almost any feasible reality, the Titans are going to get either Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Odunze, or Bowers. And the only thing that scares me is J.C. Latham. Phones are driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com at 615-737-1025. Chuck has been waiting patiently and is up next here on Stillman and Company, live out at Twin Peaks in Madison. Chuck, go ahead.
How's it going today?
Good.
Hey, the only thing I would say about the draft is a couple of wild cards in there in front of the Titans. And I don't think the Wingmans, personally, I don't think they're going to draft another quarterback after Mac Jones just a few years ago. They're not known to draft quarterbacks in the first round anyway. And then, of course, the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh is another guy known to do weird things in the draft, even back when he was with San Francisco. So I think those are 2 teams really to kind of watch out ahead of the Titans. That's all I got for you today.
Okay, so that takes us, thank you, Chuck. That takes us to what do you do if one of the 3 quarterbacks falls? And Mark, you heard Mark Dominic earlier today on the show. Mark Dominic, former NFL GM, he said he's taking a quarterback. They're like, he's going to take Drake May. He's going to take Jaden Daniels. If they're the best player on the board, he's going to take them and then figure it out.
How surprising would it be if the Patriots didn't go quarterback, stick and pick at 3 and not go quarterback?
Shocking. Because if you're going to do that, then at least take the 2 ones from Minnesota and try to get something else.
You should at least trade out if you're going to not take the quarterback at 3. But who knows?
Well, see, the only trade that would make sense there is if you don't love Drake May, would be to trade with the Giants and then take McCarthy at 6. You could take McCarthy at 6. I wouldn't take McCarthy at 6, but you can take McCarthy at 6. But I would kind of rule out the idea of the Patriots not going quarterback. The Chargers doing something weird. I've guaranteed they're not going to take Joe Alt. I think they're not going to take Joe Alt. I heard Caroline say today that she heard from somebody in the league that somebody in the league said that even though Joe Alt came on the show yesterday and he said that he'd be totally fine playing right tackle, that Joe Alt and Joe Alt's people have let it be known to these teams that have Rashawn Slater at left tackle or Andrew Thomas at left tackle for the Giants, and they've said, like, hey, Joe's really not interested in playing right tackle. He's not going to make a fuss about it. He's not going to be John Elway. He's not going to – but Joe really doesn't want to play right tackle. And I think that does, if you're going to make this pick at 5 and you're going to turn down Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors to take Joe Alton, he doesn't want to play right tackle. I mean, that's a bold strategy there. Larry is up next here on our program. Thank you for calling and waiting. Go ahead, Larry.
Hey, what's up, fellas? First of all, I wish I was there enjoying that 29-degree beer, but I couldn't make it. Listen, I have never been so pumped for the draft. We ain't never going to have to hear again. We got to coach better. We got to play better. The reality is we need a work truck, but we have the money for a Ferrari. So either way, it's going to be a home run. So trust the people that's in charge now. No more of the old idiots that's in charge. I've never been so pumped. Tighten up is what I got.
So I appreciate your call. I actually think what's crazy is that, I've been doing this for now. We've been together. We've been doing this for 9 years. And the Titans have picked, going into the draft, 15th, 5th, the Corey Davis pick, and then everything else has been kind of later. Last year was 11. This is kind of the first high. But the amount of elite prospects, Mahomes was not an elite prospect going into the draft. He ended up being an elite player, but he wasn't an elite prospect. The amount of the elite prospects the year that Corey Davis was up were not the same as the amount of elite prospects, I think, in this year's draft. Yeah, he still drafted Corey freaking Davis, so who knows. But as far as the excitement, the one thing I don't like is, and Rand said this the other day, and it sent me through the wall, like somebody shot me out of a cannon. I was so mad, was the idea that this is his first draft. And Larry said it right there, being like, the same old bozos aren't in here anymore. It's like, well, actually, the guy who was the GM when they drafted the guard at 11 last year, he is still the GM now. Now, he went to the press conference, and he talked about why they made the pick, and he held the press conference before they made the pick, and he held the press conference after the season after they made the pick. Now, he was GM then. And I remember how everybody got mad when I said, I hear that, the problem is that Rand is too busy. They say, people in the building tell me that Rand is, more of a, playing GM than he is being GM. And, oh, Jared, you don't understand. That's not fair. That's not right. And now they're doing the, oh, no, last year didn't count. Bull crap. You don't get it both ways. And so don't give me the, oh, no, these are the new guys in town. This is Rand's second draft. Let's see. I am optimistic, and I will stand that way. All right, more of your phone calls, 615-737-1025 here on the program. Plus, it's starting to scare me. It's starting to scare me just a little bit. And Robbie Stanley sent me a text that absolutely hit right at the root of my fear, which we'll do next. FanDuel Sportsbook, that's right, the NBA playoffs, giving everybody on FanDuel, all customers, 2 chances to bring home a big win with a no-sweat same-game parlay. Because every weekend you can do it of the NBA playoffs. Just place an SGP on any playoff matchup and you'll get bonus bets back if you don't win. Bet on everything from rebounds to assists to three-pointers and more. Visit FanDuel.com/JGM and shoot your shot on America's #1 sportsbook and my official sportsbook app. Visit FanDuel.com/JGM. Again, that's FanDuel.com/JGM. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 and over and present in Tennessee. Minimum 3-leg parlay required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Max refund $5 unless otherwise specified. Restrictions do apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
A lot of people have Latham as the highest graded offensive lineman in this draft. And then a lot of others have Joe Alt. And so those guys are kind of back and forth depending on what you think. But when I look at Latham, the thing that worries me about his floor is that his footwork leads to his lunging, and his footwork leads him to a lot of penalties. So he'll false start because he doesn't trust his footwork against a speed rusher, and he'll hold because his feet don't get him in the right position to be in front of him so he can punch. People think of holding as, okay, you reach out and grab. But holding is more often a problem with your footwork than it is your hands. Because if you are able to be squared up against that guy, you're not going to grab him, you're going to punch him. But if he's getting around the corner on you, you're going to reach out and grab him. And Latham has enough of those plays that it makes you kind of wonder, okay, does he have the actual speed, foot speed, to be able to get out there against the faster rushers? Now, he is very fluid for a man his size. He's like 340 pounds. But he may be best suited to play guard. He may go out at right tackle and excel.
Okay, there you go. That was Trevor talking about J.C. Latham. And Robbie Stanley sent me a text, and he said they're going to take J.C. Latham, aren't they? And I haven't evaluated them like these guys have or anything like that, but when I hear Trevor say that J.C. Latham might be better suited at guard, and I think about the 7th pick in a draft that has these kind of players in it, these kind of prospects in it, it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous. I do not want J.C. Latham. Here's the list. Again, if you're picking at 7, here's the list. Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, Odunze. That's it. Now, if a quarterback falls, that's different. But again, that's the list. And it's like, how can you screw this up? And then it's like, well, they could draft J.C. Latham, a right tackle, who might have to move to guard. One texter says, last year we were all told Skoronski was a sure thing, and look how that panned out. Now I keep hearing Alt is a sure thing. Let me just say this. Ian, where did you not hear that Peter Skoronski was a sure thing?
I don't know where.
You didn't hear it on this show. I went crazy when they drafted Skoronski. We didn't even know what position he was going to play. How can you be a sure thing if you don't, he's a sure thing. Is he going to play the outfield or is he going to pitch? I mean, unless you're Babe Ruth, there is no sure thing in that scenario. So we didn't say that there. Here, I'm feeling it. Bill has been holding patiently and is up next on Stillman & Company. Again, our draft show starts at 6. Bill, go ahead.
I have an email and starts out, Dear Rand, our O-line almost killed 2 quarterbacks this past season.
It almost.
If you get out of this draft without bolstering in a significant way our O-line, look for another job. It doesn't matter how fast the receiver is. It doesn't even matter if we take another quarterback. If we have no O-line, we're going to kill them. You got to have O-line. Thanks. Signed, Amy.
So I appreciate your call, Bill. So when it comes to me, and I'm thinking about what the Titans are going to end up doing here, it's like I hear a lot of people saying, the wide receiver is not going to help the quarterback if you can't block. Right, but they can sign Andrews Pete, who's, a Band-Aid at left tackle. Like, you can do that. And, again, it's not going to be perfect, but, you could probably get by if you got great receivers. Cincinnati showed you without an offensive line, you can figure it out. All of these options, even Latham, they all help the quarterback. Whether it's offensive line or not offensive line, they all help the quarterback. Bowers helps the quarterback. Odunze helps the quarterback. Harrison helps the quarterback. Neighbors helps the quarterback. Alt helps the quarterback. There's just one that I like better than the others. Steven said Olu Fashanu was on Mark Dominic's list of 6 elite draft prospects. That is true. And I'm okay with Olu Fashanu if you trade back. So if you end up making a move, let's say with Minnesota, and you trade you trade 7 and 106 for 11 and 23, then I'm okay with Olu Fashanu at 11. I don't think Olu Fashanu is good enough for 7. And I think the Titans have shown us just with their actions, I don't think that they think that Olu Fashanu is probably good enough at 7. Cameron Texan, all caps, please no J.C. Latham. That's how I feel. Josh says, thoughts on a Dunze at 7. Mel Kiper has him over Neighbors. I'm fine with a Dunze at 7. You know, when Rick Spielman went on his tangent about how he thinks that Roma Dunze has just crushed the pre-draft process and that the comp for Roma Dunze, he can go with A.J. Brown, I'm like, you know what? If I told you right now you could take A.J. Brown with the 7th pick tonight, like a young, no problems, clean medicals A.J. Brown, you'd take it. And so that's how I view the idea of drafting Roma Dunze. I am all, again, if like their board is going to be different than mine, right? Like TD says, Marvin Harrison's number 1 on the board. So, or at least like number 1 as far as like the potential players that could be. Like Caleb Williams might be number 1, but like Harrison, of all the options that just could theoretically be possible, like that Harrison is the guy. I've got it ranked Alt, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, and a Dunze. It could be any of those guys. I don't care who it's going to be. It could be any of those guys. So coming up at the top of the hour, Trevor Maddich, Chris Sanders, D. Mace. We will have the draft show. We'll have our breakdown, and then we go live. And as everybody always talks about, they get excited about my reaction to the Titans pick. If it's not J.C. Latham at 7, I think I'll be okay. But we shall see. Draft night in Nashville. Live from Twin Peaks right here in Madison. Plenty of spots. Come on out and see us. That's next, Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody for the draft show and then tomorrow at 2.